Prime Minister says he's giving it everything to get a new Brexit deal over the line.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Sunday the 26th of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie.
Here are your top stories this morning. The Prime Minister is on the brink of completing a new deal that could finally see the Northern Ireland Protocol resolved. But Rishi Sunak still faces a challenge to get the deal through Parliament, with the Northern Ireland Minister reportedly on resignation watch after being frozen out of the negotiations.
China has refused to condemn Russia at a meeting of finance ministers from the world's largest economies. Beijing declined to accept parts of the G20's closing statement, which denounced Moscow's aggression in the strongest terms.
And we'll also have the latest on the aftermath of the protests in Newquay over the housing of asylum seekers in a local hotel. Pro- and anti-refugee demonstrators took to the streets over the controversial issue, but we'll be taking a closer look at the impact on the town itself.
As ever, we would love to hear from you this morning. What are you up to? Why are you up so early on a Sunday morning?
Why are you watching us?
Why are you watching or listening? What's going on? GB Views at gbnews.uk. Why are we here at 6 o'clock on a Sunday
Why are
morning?
we here? Well, at least we're being paid
it.
to be here.
We love. That's one way
That
of
does
looking
help.
at it. It's because we love it, is what I was trying to say.
Yeah, and that as well. We love being together at 6 o'clock on a
Failed.
Sunday morning.
Go on, take us through.
We do like working together.
We do like working together. We have a lot of fun.
Promise.
We have a lot of fun.
Now, to our top story, and Rishi Sunak is on the brink of completing a new deal on the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Now, the Prime Minister held a conference call for Cabinet Ministers and is expected to make a statement to the House of Commons tomorrow.
Well, the Irish Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, said the deal between Great Britain and Northern Ireland was inching towards a conclusion. But what could that conclusion look like for Northern Ireland? Well, here to talk to us this morning is Brexit campaigner Suzanne Evans. And down the line, we've got political commentator Dr. John Coulter. Good morning to you both, and thank you both for your company. Suzanne, I'm going to start with you. How optimistic is it for us to think there could be a new deal on the table by Monday?
Well, I think everybody, of course, wants to be optimistic about this. I mean, we've had a stalemate in the Northern Ireland government for many years now as a result of this issue. Nobody wants to threaten the Good Friday peace agreement, but it's going to be a very difficult deal to pull off. You've got to please the DUP, you've got to please the EU, you've got to please the European Reform Group, a group of Tory backbenchers. There are rumours this morning that the Northern Ireland Minister, Steve Baker, is on a resignation watch. It's going to be a very difficult one to pull off. There are so many legal issues here. There are so many emotional issues. So it'd be very interesting. Obviously, Rishi Sunak and Number 10 are trying to say that this deal is practically done. They can please all sides. There's certainly a lot of talk about, positive talk about it. But ultimately, we've got to wait and see. It looks like the announcement might be tomorrow. Apparently, Conservative MPs have been told to turn up at the House tomorrow. A cabinet call has been scheduled, we hear. But ultimately, we've just got to wait and see, and then see what the response is to it.
OK. John, what do you think? I mean, key to this, obviously, is the DUP being happy.
Yes, well, good morning, folks. Basically, this agreement is somehow been called the Windsor Agreement. But there's the real danger if Sunak cannot sell this to the DUP and especially to the ERG, that it will effectively become the Munich Agreement Mark II, and we all know how that ended up. This is basically a very political, high-stakes poker game that Sunak has got himself involved in. And his ace card is going to have to be the phrase, sell, sell, sell. And as was said earlier, it's got to be sold to the DUP, the hard right of the DUP, because the bottom line is this: if it can't be sold to the DUP, if they reject and it doesn't meet their so-called 7 tests, well, the bottom line is that's devolution, that's the Stormont Assembly flushed down the toilet for another generation. So basically the big problem is that Sunak faces is it seems that the EU cannot get its through head, the referendum result of 2016, and it still has a claw on the jugular vein of democracy in the UK. So what this deal has got to do is to remove that EU claw from the jugular vein of British democracy.
And John, what would you like to see in this new deal for Northern Ireland? I mean, just looking at the context of all of this, I mean, I think there's been a 6th arrest now in the shooting of that off-duty police officer in Omagh this week. And that is a reminder, isn't it, of what is central to all of this, because the new IRA is at the centre of that force's investigation over in Northern Ireland. That's not to say that they are responsible, but they are, of course, being investigated. But it is a reminder, isn't it, of what is central to all of this, which is peace in Northern Ireland. And that does need to be at the centre of any negotiation that's taking place.
Yes, let's cut to the chase here. What is really on the line is the future of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. Here we are, a matter of weeks away from the Silver Jubilee, the 25th anniversary of that famous agreement. And what we're looking at is potentially the gun is back in Irish politics again. We thought that that peace process would get the gun out of Irish politics, because the big worry is that if the politicians cannot reach a deal which restores devolution, which restores the Northern Ireland Assembly and the power-sharing executive, the real fear is that the hard men on both sides, especially in the loyalist community, will say, move over politicians, it's our turn. And that's what we need to avoid. We must keep this whole negotiation process, we must keep this deal well and truly within the democratic process. We cannot afford to go back to the days of the Troubles, and we must remember somewhere in the region of 3,000 lives were lost over the course of those Troubles. That must never, ever happen again.
Politically, we've got to be realistic, Suzanne, haven't we, in all of this? There surely can be no way that this is still being worked on and will be presented as a done deal tomorrow if the DUP aren't happy, because that would almost be political suicide for the Prime Minister, wouldn't it?
It would indeed. And indeed, the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, has said that there's not going to be any deal that isn't backed by the DUP. So, the DUP have 7 red lines. They've stated there's 7 clear issues that if the deal doesn't meet those issues, they're not going to back it. And the situation that John's just so lucidly outlined is back at the forefront of our politics again in Northern Ireland. So let's see what they have to say. The 7 red lines that the DUP have, they're quite tough ones. They involve, no legal route for the European Court of Justice in trade and customs in Northern Ireland. And at the moment, that's not the case. So is the EU prepared to back the peace process to the extent that it's going to completely back out of this issue or not? It's hard to imagine that it might. But again, we'll just have to wait and see what the deal actually says and what the DUP's response is to it. But it is tenterhook stuff, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's going to be one to watch today, and hopefully we hear some more detail tomorrow. Suzanne Evans and Dr. John Coulter, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Now, China has refused to condemn Russia at a meeting of the G20 finance leaders.
Yes, Beijing declined to endorse a statement deploring Moscow's invasion of Ukraine and rejecting the use of nuclear weapons.
And that's after a series of protests against the war took place around the world yesterday, including here in the UK, where Marina Litvinenko, the widow of the defector poisoned in London, led calls for a Ukrainian victory.
Well, joining us now is military historian and writer Patrick Benham-Crosswell. So what do you make of all of this, Patrick? Refusing to say that Russia have done anything wrong?
Well, I think it's always the case that China plays its own game. And at the moment, China can see its near neighbour and source of cheap energy in a fight with China's main competitor, the West or whatever. And why wouldn't they enjoy that?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's a different game with China. I mean, the fact that they are still on neutral territory officially in all of this, I guess, has to be seen as a positive thing. What then of the comments from Marina Litvinenko and I mean, what is small but very brave protests by some Russians? It's not going to be enough, is it? This is the problem, because any sort of push against Putin would have to be significant to stop it being quelled.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, Marina Litvinenko said what she said, and there's quite an element of she would say that, wouldn't she? And she's probably right, but that doesn't alter the price of fish in the Donetsk and Dnieper or in Ukraine. The reality is that the Ukrainians are clearly in an existential fight for their existence, and as is President Putin. He's very like the Sun King. L'état c'est moi. He is Russia until he's moved or removed, which a lot of people have been saying might happen sometime quite soon, but it hasn't. The war will go on.
Interesting, though, isn't it, the context of all of this? I mean, just yesterday we were talking about the 12-point peace plan that Beijing had put forward, including calls for a ceasefire. And then today we're talking about them refusing to condemn Russia for its action in Ukraine. It does seem at odds with each other, doesn't it?
Maybe. I mean, if you want to be the broker of peace, you can't go around saying Russia's very, very, very bad, but be good boys now, and we can find a way out of this. And I suspect, this war is not what Putin signed up for. He signed up for a quick 3-5 month-long operation, which would deliver him instant victory. It means obviously a very long way from that. I think public statements by anyone, by any party in this, are obviously for the public consumption rather than private. But if you wanted to broker a peace, you wouldn't start by saying, well, we think the Russians are terrible. That said, I don't think China is likely to be a credible broker of any peace, simply because of their relationship with Russia.
In the theatre of war itself, it's difficult. I mean, a lot of people have described where we are now as some sort of stalemate. I don't know if that's sort of accurate or not, really. But obviously, these ongoing calls for air support. Now, what do you make of what Ben Wallace was saying? Saying, we're not going to supply direct air support at the moment to Ukraine, which seems actually pretty sensible when he then says, but what we're not against is backfilling a country like Poland, who could then provide air support, which is perhaps more suitable, and we backfill to a fellow NATO country. Now, is that a solution that could make a big difference?
Right. It takes a very long time to train a pilot on a new jet. And yes, if you had fast jet experience, so if you've been flying MiGs, you could probably learn to fly a Typhoon or an F-16 in the sort of 6-month window. But at that level of training, when a NATO pilot does that, that makes them the least capable pilot in the combat squadron. You then have to go on and learn how to be section leaders, force-ship leaders, this, that, and the other. So instantly creating an air force on a new jet just doesn't happen. If Poland are prepared to send Russia more, send Ukraine more MiGs, that's slightly different, and for sure, backfilling their capability is there. But this is not going to be something that has an impact on the battlefield in Ukraine until, at the earliest, the back end of this year. And whereas at the moment there's, pick your forecast, between 250,000 Russians ready to go again when the ground's right, and Western air or increased air capability from jets provided by the West to Ukraine isn't going to be a factor in that.
OK. Look, Patrick, as always, it's really good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed.
And let's bring you up to date with what else is going on today. And police in Northern Ireland have arrested a 6th person in connection with the attempted murder of an off-duty officer in Omagh. John Caldwell was at a sports centre with his son, where he coaches a youth football team, when he was shot. The Detective Chief Inspector remains critically ill.
Rishi Sunak says he's giving everything to achieve a new deal over the Northern Ireland Protocol by the end of this weekend. Speaking to the Sunday Times, he said he's hopeful of a positive outcome with the EU, describing it as unfinished business. He said it's vital to ensure a return to power sharing in the province.
The former Home Secretary has urged the Chancellor to halt the planned corporation tax rise in his budget next month. But Priti Patel says now is not the time and called for an end to government interference with business. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the move will make for a fairer tax system.
Following on from tax and money and all that sort of thing, and it'd be interesting to know, excuse me, if you think something should be done on that proposed rise. What's it going to do to... I have concerns about what it's going to do to small businesses, particularly. But maybe, you know, that money needs to be raised and that's the way of doing it. But if you are feeling flush, are you planning for Mother's Day, which is 19th, Mothering Sunday is the 19th, right? What's that, 3 weeks?
It's not
today?
long, actually, yeah.
No,
2-3 weeks.
According to the Daily Star Sunday, if you're feeling flush, you can go to one of Gordon Ramsay's restaurant.
Yeah.
Right, he's doing a special Mother's Day deal.
Oh, yeah.
4 people, £1,000. Doesn't include the booze.
Or the service charge.
Or the service charge, which is 10%, so that's an extra... So a minimum of 1,150 quid, plus a bottle of something, which will cost you, heaven knows what,
another
a couple of £100.
probably, yeah.
So there you go. So are you feeling... I mean, that's a special deal.
And that's a deal, is it? Being advertised as a deal.
Yeah.
My gosh.
So there you go. But you do get put at the inspiration table.
Well, I'd hope you would, for that
You
money.
get a bespoke menu.
Wow.
You should hope so, for 250 quid a head.
Will you be taking your mum?
No.
No.
No,
sorry.
I won't.
Sorry, Mummy Dixon.
You've got a nice card, which will be posted. But no, I think stuff like that is crazy.
No.
I mean, look, if you've got the money, then you spend
treat
it how you
your mum.
like, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm sure mothers would appreciate a bunch of flowers or a...
They don't want you to go into poverty over Mother's Day, do they? I mean, I said to my mum at the weekend, oh, I need to book you somewhere really nice for Mother's Day. And she said, oh, don't be doing any of that. It's commercial tosh, she said. But I do need to do something. So you feel bad, don't you, not spoiling your mummy? But I think that's a bit too far.
That's overspoiling.
That's overspoiling now. She
money.
wouldn't want that. But let us know if you've got any plans for Mother's Day. What are you thinking? What's in the diary? GBViews at gbnews.uk. Let us know what you're up to on your Sunday as well, please.
Yes,
got any nice plans? Let us know.
You got any nice plans?
I think I might be going for a roast later.
Oh, really?
It's always food related with me.
It's always
What
food
am I doing for
related.
lunch? What are you doing?
I don't know.
Oh.
Apart from having a snooze when I get home.
Do you know what? I wouldn't mind a walk today.
Oh,
Fancy
really?
a walk, yeah.
Oh, that'd be quite nice.
A
Maybe
bit of
later
fresh
then.
air. Yeah, and you're going to bed, are you?
I'm going to bed. There you go. I'm ancient. I need to sleep. Now, with the cost of living squeezing household finances, a confidential support service offering help has been travelling across 35 locations in London on a bus.
Yes, the charity Debt Free Advice says so many people experiencing money concerns for the first time, so they've been incredibly busy. Lisa Hartle has the story.
Many who've stepped onto the advice bus over the last 3 months are experiencing financial difficulties for the first time. The Debt Free Advice Service started their tour of the capital after the huge rise in the number of people affected by the cost of living crisis. Kensington Leisure Centre is one of their last stops.
So unsurprisingly, the cost of living crisis is having a real struggle on people's pockets. If we look at the number of incoming inquiries to our service from this January compared to a year ago, the number of inquiries has gone up by 50%. And what people are affected by is their housing costs. So for the last 17 years that our service has been around, we've seen that people with rent arrears and council tax arrears as the top 2 debts. But the first time now, we're seeing utility debts as the 3rd most common debt that people are coming to us with. And utility debts have also gone up by 46% for electric and 43% for gas for the same year.
The service offers advice on what help people might have if they're struggling to pay bills.
I come here for debt advice today, and they were quite helpful to me, Lisa. I wanted help with my council tax debt, and it's being sorted now. They gave me the link with a couple of organisations where I can get this done.
Some of the people stepping off the bus told me it was a relief to be able to talk to someone.
I think second only to kind of health circumstances, nobody speaks about their finances. As a country and a culture, we're quite prude in that respect. We don't like to speak about it, but it is so common. In London, we know over half of people are worried about their finances, so there's nothing to be ashamed about. Our team see this day in, day out. They're experts and they really want to help you.
Aside from providing confidential advice to people, the purpose of the bus was also to advertise the service, which, although will no longer be on the road, is still providing help either in person or on the phone. Lisa Hartle, GB News, London.
There's lots more to come, including the latest protests in Newquay over the housing of asylum seekers in local hotels. That's after the weather.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. It's looking dry for much of the UK through Sunday, plenty of sunny spells, but still feeling rather chilly out there. Looking at the pressure pattern, and well, it's dominated by this large area of high pressure, continues to bring settled weather to many parts over the course of the next few days. In fact, much of the week to come. Looking at the rest of the day, we've got plenty of sunny spells from the word go, a frost in places, so quite chilly, but also a few showers down the east coast. These will just filter a little further inland as we move through into the afternoon. Perhaps a little bit wintry over the higher ground, but many places staying dry. There will be some bright or sunny spells, the best of the sunshine across southeast England and also central and northwestern parts of Scotland. Temperatures overall around average for the time of year, 7 to 9 Celsius, but feeling cooler than this, particularly across the southeast, where we still have that brisk northeasterly breeze. Into the evening time, clearing skies for many. However, we will keep some cloud across northern parts of England into Wales, the Midlands later on as well. It stopped temperatures from falling too low here, but either side of this, a frost reforming, temperatures -2 to -4 Celsius possible. In the towns and cities, though, holding up just above freezing. So it means another frosty start for many as we head into Monday morning. There'll be variable clouds, some sunshine around, the risk of 1 or 2 light showers across the far east. These push their way westwards once more as we move through the day, but generally light, few and far between. Most places on Monday will stay dry. Perhaps the sunshine becoming a bit more limited on Monday to northwestern parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland. A lot of cloud around, but I'm hopeful there'll be some glimmers of sunshine at times. Temperatures again 7 to 9 Celsius, but still feeling chilly with that northeasterly breeze continuing. And high pressure continues to dominate. It will stay largely dry for much of this week. Large amounts of cloud though, but there will be some sunshine and temperatures generally around average, but still on the chilly side.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
6:24, good morning to you. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. Here is what else is coming up for you today.
At 10 to 7, we'll be getting the latest showbiz scoop with our wonderful Stephanie Tecci, including the latest controversy over the upcoming Amy Winehouse biopic. And today is one of the biggest days in the sporting calendar, with both the English and Scottish League Cup finals being held. We'll preview both at 7:20 with Aidan. Now, do we say, this always gets me, and I'll ask Steph, biopic or biopic? Well, I would say biopic. Is that wrong?
I don't know.
Would you say biopic? I think Steph says biopic, you know?
Yeah, I think I would have said biopic in the past, but biopic seems to have become a thing.
Or is that the American pronunciation?
Yeah. I don't know, because it's like a bio picture, isn't it?
Yeah, it would make more sense to say biopic.
But I don't know. If you
biopic.
know, gbviews@gbnews.uk. It'd be useful for us.
We always
to know.
throw out questions, don't we?
And you always have answers.
And you always have the answers. Like we said yesterday, it's a boomerang.
It is.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, hundreds of demonstrators from rival groups have been protesting outside a Newquay hotel used to house asylum seekers.
Yes, politicians from both sides have been urging for protests to be called off. Our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody was at the scene.
They watched from the windows at a duchy divided. There are Cornish flags on both sides of the street here, the side that supports the housing of asylum seekers in their community and the side that doesn't.
So, on one side of the street, you have the people from Newquay who are saying enough is enough. They no longer feel safe in their own community. And then you have the people on the other side of the street that are calling them racist, that are calling them fascists. There are some very heated exchanges coming across this street. No violence as yet.
And that's the way it stayed. In a statement, Devon and Cornwall Police said officers deployed to the Newquay area to facilitate a planned protest. Officers engaged with those in attendance and the event passed peacefully. No arrests have been made. No arrests, but plenty of opinions.
I live 500 yards up the road. They rob shops, they're following the kids.
Yeah.
The police are going, nothing's happening. The police have been here more times than I can count.
It's not racism. No, it's nothing to do with that. It's to do with fairness.
The head of Cornwall Council is calling you guys racist.
That's what we can't handle. I am a humanitarian.
My mother was a refugee here, and I feel very strongly that, well, I wouldn't be here if my mother hadn't been welcomed.
I'm Cornish. One thing to say, on and hag all, one and all.
The racism that's being whipped up on social media is more about divisive attitudes and less about unity. And Cornwall is supposed to be a welcoming place. We welcome visitors, and it shouldn't just be the ones who can pay.
Now, everyone over there, I recognise two faces out the whole of this town. Maybe 3 people I've spotted, 3 people. They're all bussed in.
Jeff Moody, GB News.
Oh, it's a controversial issue, isn't it? Dear me. But I'll tell you what's interesting there is hearing both sides of the argument and then, you know, come to your own conclusion on what you think. But it's interesting that Jeff managed to get to speak to all sides there.
Yeah. Now, stay with us. There's lots more to come, including a look inside today's papers alongside Tom Slater and Emma Burnell.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
.31, very good morning to you. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie, or 7:31 if you're in Spain.
Yes.
Which Chris is. Chris says, Stephen and Ellie asked why we're up so early, because we're in Spain and it's 7 o'clock, off to the beach for a walk soon. Of course, it's still stupid early for the locals.
Yeah, you should be having a lie-in on a Sunday.
Oh, wow.
They're lovely, though. A nice walk on a Spanish beach on a Sunday morning.
Nice. Whereabouts you are.
Lovely, lovely. And Nigel's been in touch. Morning, Stephen and Ellie. I watch every morning as I have motor neuron disease and I rarely sleep. Great to see you smiling, Ellie. Is there any news on how Anne is doing? Please send our regards.
Oh, yes, she's just on a little sabbatical. So she will be back, but she's just having a nice break.
A well-deserved break as well.
Why not?
And she might even be watching us. She often does, doesn't she?
Yeah, she does. Morning, Anne.
Morning, Anne, if you're watching. She's probably in bed, though, let's be honest.
She deserves it, because she wasn't expecting to... I talked when I started a year ago, I was like, oh, Anne, do you want to come and work? And she was like, oh, yeah, I'll give it a whirl.
Ah, she's a good egg.
So she wasn't expecting to be doing all this. So she's just having a little bit of time off.
A well-deserved break, yeah. And Lynn's been in touch. I believe we have a picture attached to this, Lynn. Very exciting. I've been awake since 5 a.m. due to having a miniature schnauzer called Millie. She's got a 5 o'clock alarm every day. She goes out, has her breakfast, and then back to sleep whilst I am wide awake. Oh, my
she
goodness.
looks mischievous there.
She's very, very cute. If you're listening on the radio, tiny little fluffy grey and white dog. Beautiful, with lovely pointy ears. And a little tongue poking out there. Very cute.
And let's see if we've got this video, should we, from Chrissy. Morning, Chris. He says, I wake up early every weekend to watch you both. I thought you'd like to see something to make you smile. Yes, we would. Thank you very much indeed.
Yes, please, always.
Who said you can't teach an old dog new tricks?
Oh.
This is Bully. Bullseye. A Parson Russell. He's more than 12 years old and he's just learnt to do this.
Oh, he presses the button to get a snack.
Oh, very nice.
Oh, what a good boy.
He sits on the sofa, loves watching GB News. Thanks for all your hard work. That's very sweet. Thank you for sending that in.
That's very cute. Very cute. We love a dog picture here, don't we? Yeah. Keep them coming in. GBViews at gbnews.uk.
Time for the papers this morning. The Sunday Times says Rishi Sunak is going to get Brexit done and could potentially reveal his deal without the blessing of the DUP. Surely not.
1 in 100 police officers in England and Wales faced criminal charges last year. That's according to The Observer.
This Mail on Sunday leads on the turmoil in the Conservative Party over allegations that the PM is using his upcoming visits to Paris and Berlin to schmooze EU nations.
Love that word. The Telegraph leads on the news that the PM is set to scrap Boris Johnson's Northern Ireland Protocol bill as part of his new deal with the EU.
And the Sunday Mirror splashes on a plea from an 11-year-old Ukrainian boy to the PM, asking him to reunite him with his dad in the UK.
The Sunday People leads on news that Matt Hancock has set up a TV company following his stint on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here.
And let's not talk about the last one. Daily Star, we'll zip past that one, because it's nonsense. I don't want to talk about Satanists, frankly. So let's go through the papers instead with editor of Spike, Tom Slater, and political consultant Emma Burdell. Good morning, you two.
Morning.
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 Tom, let's have a look at the Sunday Telegraph, should we? And this idea that, I mean, the PM supposedly got this deal that we're going to hear about tomorrow, but it's being written up as a snub to Boris Johnson.
Yes, so the political and the personal kind of got mixed up here again, as they always have. Obviously, Boris Johnson's been making these kind of comments from the backbenches, kind of chiding Rishi Sunak for potentially giving in to Brussels, particularly on the Northern Ireland Protocol bill. But obviously, beneath that is the fact that this deal seems to be imminent. I know we've been saying that for some time now. And there's, as the story kind of details, there's so many different moving parts to this. It seems like Sunak has managed to get some concessions on questions like VAT, state aid and so on. Also getting that green lane to allow goods that are only going to stay in Northern Ireland to be able to go there without many checks. But now that actually the details of it are imminent, concerns about resignation, Steve Baker in particular, who's a Northern Ireland minister at the moment, one of those original kind of Brexit Spartans. And I think in this discussion, it's often people like Steve Baker or the DUP are kind of caricatured as sort of mad purists. But I think it is worth bearing in mind that when it comes to Northern Ireland Protocol, the setup that was ushered in by that, keeping Northern Ireland in the single market, because this is an arrangement that no other nation in sort of comparable situation would be expected to put up with. It was a kind of consequence of some very botched negotiations.
Which were handled by Boris Johnson.
Well, this is precisely it, which is one of the things that makes it so rich that he's been piping up about this. This, remember, was his oven-ready deal, and it's turned out, as the cliché goes, to be thoroughly half-baked. But I think it's because it's become so long drawn out and it's quite technical and everyone just wants it to kind of go away. I think we can't ignore some of the fundamental problems and concerns around sovereignty there, which is why some people might not be very happy with it when it finally materialises.
Right, Emma?
It seems to me that Rishi has made a decision, and that's what's happened. And there was a lot of prevaricating for a long time. I'm not sure that he did the political management as well as he could have done. It seems that they weren't having the kind of behind-the-scenes conversations with the DUP, with some of the ERG, that they could have been trying to have to peel off the more soft members of those parties to make sure that they could be on side. But I believe that the compromise it does have a role for the European Courts of Justice, but a very, very, very much removed one. So it may be the case that if something falls at several legal hurdles, we're talking about maybe once a decade, there will be a decision that goes that far, but very, very unlikely.
So it would involve some sort of DUP compromise, but
not
a lot.
Not a lot. An awful lot of what's been asked for by that side has been worked out, worked on, got to. So it does feel like a deal that people should... most people should be able to come together and support from both sides. Now it's a case of political posturing.
Tom doesn't look very
No,
convinced.
I'm just not really convinced, because I think the problem is a lot of these things, as you say, have essentially... in many respects, are kind of cosmetic. So the European Court of Justice is still the ultimate arbiter of things under the protocol, but there's just more hurdles that have been put in the way. Similarly with these questions about VAT, state aid, subsidies, etc. We have got into a situation where you've got a UK government effectively going to Brussels and asking politely for the right to be able to set subsidy policy in a part of UK territory. That's such a bizarre situation that we've ended up in. It's often portrayed as the inevitable consequence of Brexit. I think it's the inevitable consequence of the fact that Brexit was so botched in terms of the negotiations and in terms of the way it was frustrated by various different characters, and particularly given the way that there were people who were trying to frustrate the process, and you had a series of quite weak Tory leaders who weren't able to kind of stand up to it. So even though there'll be a lot of talk about the purism of certain Brexiteers or the purism of certain members of the DUP if they decide to turn against this deal, it is worth remembering what a strange situation it is that the UK has formally left the European Union, but there's a part of UK territory which is still subject to hundreds of rules.
I'll tell you what is going to be interesting, because one of the key negotiators in the original deal was Lord Frost. He's going to be on the Camilla Tominey show 9:30 this morning, and he's one who said, I remember him saying on Farage, maybe 12 months ago, you know, this was agreed to, the protocol, with no intention of sticking to it. You know, they knew it sort of wouldn't work very long. But anyway, so that'll be interesting, see what he has to say. Let's have a look at the Sunday Express, Emma. A crackdown on activist lawyers milking the system.
Yeah, this is a lot of bluster and very little policy, from what it seems. There is a 37 million cost of legal aid for people going through the asylum claims. There is concerns from government that some of these are being drawn out, that people are using avenues that eventually fail. Although we actually know that quite a lot of these legal challenges, when asylum cases are initially rejected, are actually, they were won. So significantly, like quite a high proportion, unusually high proportion are won. So it might be better, if you really want to save this money, to actually get the decisions right in the first place, and that would stop you having to spend all this money on legal aid. It feels like the kind of thing that you say to get a good headline, rather than a policy that's going to actually solve what I think all sides can agree is a very broken system.
Something needs to be done, though, doesn't it? When the government makes a decision on something, which, you know, the vast majority of the country seem to support, and nothing happens because the lawyers jump on. I mean, it doesn't seem right.
I mean, there is a legal process, and that's only right. We should not, and nobody should support a politician being the final arbiter of these things, because you know, this time it might be something you support, next time it might not be, and we don't want to. You know, I'm really conscientious of not setting precedents when I agree with the intent behind bad policy. You know, you can agree with intent all you like, but bad policy is bad policy.
Yeah.
Tom, what do you make of that?
Well, I think that when it comes down to this very kind of vexed issue, it should essentially be the role of government to, if they want to change the law, they should change the law. If that's deemed to come into conflict with, you know, European human rights law, etc., I think that should open up a conversation about whether we should be in those conventions. I think that it should be something which, as you say, there is one rule applied evenly to everyone. I think the problem is because you do have this interaction between domestic law and the ECHR that can create situations where people think this isn't right, that this person potentially has been able to have to continue to stay in the country. And also it effectively continues the pantomime in some different ways, where you can kind of have ministers continue to kind of gesture menacingly at the lawyers and so on, without actually, again, kind of grasping nettle. If you want to set laws in a particular way, if you want to open up an argument about why we, for instance, need to get out from the European Court, have that argument.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, I would probably come at it from a different perspective, but have the argument, propose the law. Don't just moan about the lawyers.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Although, well, we've gone through all that sort of stuff. Let's move on to something else, should we? In the Sunday Telegraph, we had all the fuss about Roald Dahl recently. Now, Ian Fleming's novels have been rewritten.
Yes.
Bond has changed.
Bond's gone woke. No, this is a story very similar to Roald Dahl, actually, a story that everyone's been absorbing this week, whereby the owners of the estate, of the novels, they're bringing out the kind of classic collection, if you will, or new editions, and they've let these so-called sensitivity readers loose on them to make sure that anything which might effectively upset kind of modern sensibilities are taken out. Now, given the fact that these novels are quite old and they were written for an adult audience, there are some things in there which might strike people as racist, as by modern standards, certain descriptions which sound stereotypical and so on. But at the same time, they were written of a certain time. And do we want to get into a situation where everything does have to be updated almost generation upon generation because there are words, attitudes, whatever it might be that upset us? I mean, I think in the current set of editions, there's some sort of disclaimer which is going to be at the front, but apparently that's not enough. Whole sentences have been changed, grafted on. And that's one thing that we saw with Roald Dahl as well. It's like when you're actually getting into a situation where you're inserting entire sentences, it does get to the point where you think, at what point does this cease to be that individual's novel? And it just becomes a kind of approximation of it for a new audience. And if people want to write new books, which are more in line with people's sensibilities, which I think aren't going to upset people, great. But doing this kind of endlessly doesn't seem to me to be sensible. And also there's no demand for it. There's no big, huge section of James Bond fans who are saying, we love these novels, but we really don't like that stuff. Can you take it out? It's all happening at the behest of the publishing houses themselves because they're trying to ward off some sort of hypothetical controversy that doesn't even exist yet. It's a very strange state of affairs.
What do you think?
I mean, I tend to agree. I think we need to understand complex characters are complex. And even our heroes are... I mean, James Bond is a heavy-drinking misogynist. kills at the drop of a hat. This is not a guy doesn't have his complexities, and you can't write all of that out. That he is also demonstrating attitudes that were prevalent in the times that the books were written should be a discussion, not a closed down of discussion. We should say, you know, this is what an agent of the British state probably did think about foreigners at the time, and isn't that interesting? Let's talk about why that was, how that happened, think about the ways that we've moved on and what an agent might be like now. But I think in part, because Bond as a franchise, as a character, still exists in our modern world, we feel better able maybe to try and make him represent modern mores and values.
Yeah, but it's interesting that, isn't it? Because we need to. I've got to say, I've never read a Bond book in my life, but I think I've seen every film. And so they're making the Bond films now to fit in with how, you know, with our modern thinking,
which is perfectly fine because they're newly written films.
So
that's different.
Fine. I was going to say, but why then you would need to rewrite a book? Because I think you just need to read everything within a context, don't you?
And I think until 5 minutes ago, we trusted people to do that. Because it's when you think about it, it would be endless. You're going to go through Shakespeare and find that all this is a bit weird when it comes to describing foreigners. What do you do when you end up with the Old Testament? I mean, all of these different things, you do wonder
where do you draw the line?
And so why don't we just trust people to get on with it and appreciate these things?
And teach critical reading skills, which is actually a far more important thing than protecting people from things that might upset them. Teach them how to cope with things that upset them, because the world upsets people.
Yeah, no, I agree. We've got to be more resilient, haven't we? You know, if you've got a thought on that, I'm sure you have. Let us know. GBNews.uk. Emma, Tom, thank you very much. We're going to catch up with you a little bit later on.
Thank you.
Now let's bring you up to date with what else is going on today. And most members of the G20 have condemned the war in Ukraine, except for China and Russia, who refused to sign a joint declaration. It comes as Ukraine's president says he plans to meet China's Xi Jinping after Beijing set out a peace plan for the two countries. Volodymyr Zelensky said it would be beneficial for security around the world.
Labour's calling for ministers to prescribe the Wagner Group as a terror organisation. The Shadow Foreign and Home Secretaries are accusing the Russian mercenary group of being a terror outfit which commits appalling atrocities. The move would make it a criminal offence to belong to the private military company, attend its meetings or encourage support.
Nearly 85,000 buildings were without power yesterday in Los Angeles as the storm continues to hit California. A low-pressure system from the Arctic has led to heavy snow, rain and cold weather across the state. The storm has triggered the first blizzard warning in California since 1989.
Now, time for a bit of showbiz news for you this morning. Stephanie Tetchy is here. Good morning.
That was so weird.
Yeah, I know.
Jazz hands.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are both of you? Looking lovely.
Thanks.
All right. So my voice has gone a little bit
No,
today.
don't worry,
too
you're
much
fine.
singing.
Have a sip of your tea here.
Tea, it's gone. I finished
You
it.
need some lemon and ginger, Stephen.
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Fix
we
your
do.
voice
Oh,
right
We're
up
very
for the
snippy.
show.
We have a question for you.
Yes.
We've been having a discussion.
Oh, yes.
Biopic.
Yeah.
Or biopic.
Oh, my
Or
gosh, I
biopic.
heard you earlier saying that, so I Googled it, and apparently it's biopic.
Right.
Yeah.
So you were correct.
Yeah, biopic, because I get confused sometimes. I'm like, is it biopic? Biopic. Google says it's biopic, so I'm going to go with that for now.
Google tends to be right.
I hope so.
Biopic. Yeah, well, it makes more sense. Does make more
as
sense.
you said,
Anyway,
yeah.
there's controversy, not over the word, but over the one in production.
Well, Amy Winehouse, you know, it's one of the most anticipated films that most people are can't wait to watch. It's going to be released next year, but there's been photos that's been released which have been attacked by her friends who think it's quite distasteful. So it's scenes of Marissa Abella, who's playing Amy, on a stretcher being taken out of Amy's real-life home in Camden Flat. After this was in real life, it happened. It was after a 36-hour drug session, marathon session, which ended her going to rehab. But Mitch Winehouse has given the green light for this to be filmed in Amy's house. The estate of Amy have, you know, given the blessing for this film in comparison to previous documentaries that have come out. But, you know, friends who are close to Amy have said this is quite distasteful.
But isn't it the reality? I mean, in a sense, you know, there's this hugely talented young woman who you know, whose life came to an end because of what she'd put her body through, and let's not sugarcoat it.
Yeah, and
I
you
mean,
know...
so don't people really need to realise that? I mean, it's not just about her talent, it's about her mistakes as well.
It is, and you know what? You cannot, you know, separate Amy Winehouse and her drug addiction. That was a big part of her journey. But I guess, you know, there's people who are still alive that are close to her, such as her friends, and, well, obviously her family have given it the green light, but I think for her friends, it's a bit too close to home, and it's also reliving some of her darkest moments. And, you know, when we talk about Mitch Winehouse and Amy Winehouse, they did have a bit of a rocky relationship at times where, you know, with some of these showbiz, you know, celebrities, their parents forget they're human. And, you know, Mitch Winehouse has been heavily criticised in the past for, you know, being more of a manager than more of a father. And this is the same thing that's coming up again in this kind of situation, because it's not like they've hired a different property. They're using the actual flat, which Mitch still owns. And I think a lot of people are saying it's a bit too distasteful, and it brings up that question, Stephen and Ali, how far is dramatic licence, you know? Do we need to see everything in this biopic? And, you know, how about the people who are left behind?
And it must be difficult for those people who are left behind, like the friends. I mean, we have seen stills from the film of the actress playing Amy Winehouse in the streets. I mean, looking, obviously she's acting, but looking very distressed. I mean, it's very difficult for the friends, as you say, that are left behind. But, I mean, how do you do it tastefully? I mean, as Stephen says, someone who had their own struggles, it is a difficult balance, isn't it, to portray the talent along with the struggle. But it can be done, because we saw it with Elvis last year, and when actors work really closely with the family, you can get there, can't you?
You know what? It's that balance of light and shades, which I guess we will see in the film, because there was moments where Amy was sober at the beginning of her career, and that voice, that's the main thing people are going to see, and hopefully they'll bring it justice. The biopic's been directed by Sam Taylor-Johnson, who, again, has said that she directed 50 Shades of Grey, and she said she's going to do it, you know, give it the justice it deserves. So I can imagine when we do watch it, there will be that balance. But I guess for all of us, we remember those horrible pictures we used to see of Amy in the newspapers. So actually, that is the reality of it. But
what are fans thinking?
I think fans are eager just to watch the film. From what I've seen online, they just want to see people. I think fans tend to forget about Amy's dark side, and it's the music that lasts for Amy. I don't think we'll ever get a singer like her in this generation. So I think as a die-hard Amy fan, you just want to concentrate on the music. But again, you know, with showbiz, there's always these horrible tales of what happens behind the scenes, whether it's drug addiction, depression. That's the ugly side to fame. So sometimes those stuff does need to be portrayed.
Yeah, it's true. Hey, now, what's going on with Gaga?
Oh, well, you know, there's no mountain too high for Lady Gaga and her two French bulldogs, Gustav and Koji. Last year, they were kidnapped by her dog walker, who was shot in the knee, actually. He survived, luckily. But the woman who returned the dogs is now suing Lady Gaga. So at the time, Lady Gaga put out a $500 million reward, saying that anyone who returns it, there'll be no questions asked, you'll get the reward. This woman was actually dating the father of the assailant, and she didn't, of course, get the money, and she ended up being arrested for being in possession of stolen property. But now she's suing Gaga for $500 million because she's saying, actually, on that reward, you said no questions asked. And I've returned the dogs, but now she hasn't received her reward money. So she's taken Lady Gaga to court, and she's hoping actually to triple the damages to $1.5 million.
Wow. I mean, come on. No court, surely.
Oh, you'll be surprised.
It's the audacity, though, isn't it? I mean,
it is. It's like, did you really care about returning those dogs? Or for her, it was just about the reward. That's all she's made a, complaint about. But the courts are taking it seriously, and it is going to be a case. But hopefully Lady Gaga will win.
So she's wanting $1.5 million.
Yeah, for returning the dogs.
Which she had anyway, or a boyfriend had anyway.
So we have to wait and see, but I'm sure Gaga's going Gaga about it and not too happy. She probably won't give her a penny or a cent.
No, doubt she will. And from one... Well, actually, we've got three incredible sort of divas, if you like. Britney.
Yeah, Britney, at the moment, she's just come up to a year of being free from her conservatorship. There was a big, nice feature in The Sun talking about how has this year gone for Britney, and, there's a lot of questions whether she...
Up and down.
It is up and down, and whether she's still in the right state. And she had had a bit of a doggy drama this week as well, because one of her Alsatians went missing and then ended up biting an elderly man. So she got warned from America's version of the RSPCA to say that she should keep her dog on a leash.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
There are still concerns about Brittany, aren't there?
I do worry about Brittany because, you know, every time you do go on Instagram, you just see her kind of just performing in front of her phone or just saying some really weird stuff, and I think she's become a bit of a spectacle, and it shouldn't be that when clearly someone's going through mental health issues. And I hope this story will have a good ending because it's quite concerning.
You do wonder with... I don't know why there's this reluctance with a lot of people to just... close the door, close the curtains and just get on with life.
Yeah,
I suppose you want the fame, do they?
You do want the fame, and I think as well, when you've been like a child star like Brittany has, it's almost like you've grown up in the limelight and
you don't know anything
it's all you know kind of thing, and then to have your freedom taken away from you, then to have it back, it's almost like a child who's just been given free reign of the candy store.
Stephanie, thank you.
Lots of love, guys.
We can't keep you off the camera. We'll see you a little bit later on.
See you soon.
We've got all the top stories heading away in just a moment after the weather.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. It's looking dry for much of the UK through Sunday, plenty of sunny spells, but still feeling rather chilly out there. Looking at the pressure pattern, and, well, it's dominated by this large area of high pressure, continues to bring settled weather to many parts over the course of the next few days. In fact, much of the week to come. Looking at the rest of the day, we've got plenty of sunny spells from the word go, a frost in places, so quite chilly, but also a few showers down the east coast. These will just filter a little further inland as we move through into the afternoon. Perhaps a little bit wintry over the higher ground, but many places staying dry. There will be some bright or sunny spells, the best of the sunshine across southeast England and also central and northwestern parts of Scotland. Temperatures overall around average for the time of year, 7 to 9 Celsius, but feeling cooler than this, particularly across the southeast, where we still have that brisk northeasterly breeze. Into the evening time, clearing skies for many. However, we will keep some cloud across northern parts of England into Wales, the Midlands later on as well. It stopped temperatures from falling too low here, but either side of this, a frost reforming, temperatures -2 to -4 Celsius possible. In the towns and cities, though, holding up just above freezing. So it means another frosty start for many as we head into Monday morning. There'll be variable clouds, some sunshine around, the risk of 1 or 2 light showers across the far east. These push their way westwards once more as we move through the day, but generally light, few and far between. Most places on Monday will stay dry. Perhaps the sunshine becoming a bit more limited on Monday to northwestern parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland. A lot of cloud around, but I'm hopeful there'll be some glimmers of sunshine at times. Temperatures again 7 to 9 Celsius, but still feeling chilly with that northeasterly breeze continuing. And high pressure continues to dominate. It will stay largely dry for much of this week. Large amounts of cloud though, but there will be some sunshine and temperatures generally around average, but still on the chilly side.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain.
Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel. Magnificent.
That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Prime Minister says he's giving it everything to get a new Brexit deal over the line.
Good morning to you. 7 o'clock, Sunday the 26th of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Abby.
Here are your top stories this morning. The Prime Minister is on the brink of completing a new deal that could finally see the Northern Ireland Protocol resolved. But Rishi Sunak still faces a challenge to get the deal through Parliament, with the Northern Ireland Minister reportedly on resignation watch after being frozen out of the negotiations.
A funeral director is calling for bereavement support to be included in the national curriculum across England and Wales to help students cope with the loss of a loved one. We're going to be talking to Reverend to hear her thoughts.
And how are you managing to keep an eye on your bank account during the cost of living crisis? Well, a mother of three we'll be speaking to later is going to share her secret to watching the pennies for paying for most of her bills in cash. I think it's quite clever.
It sort of is clever, but I mean, I just don't ever touch cash now.
No, but
this is the thing. I wouldn't want to go back to cash because it's just not as convenient.
No, but this idea is quite clever. So she has little envelopes, and then she takes the cash out, and then she puts them in little envelopes. So it'd be like £10 for, I don't know, takeaways, £10 for the shop, and then she divvies it up like that. And then once you've emptied the envelope, that's it.
I can see the sense in it.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Well, Rishi Sunak is on the brink of completing a new deal on the Northern Ireland Protocol, apparently.
Yes, the Prime Minister held a conference call for Cabinet Ministers and is expected to make a statement to the House of Commons tomorrow.
The Irish Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, said the deal between Great Britain and Northern Ireland was inching towards a conclusion, but what could that actually look like? Well, let's talk to Brexit campaigner Suzanne Evans, who's here in the studio. Good morning to you. Now, look, depending on what paper you read, there's different views on all of this. It would be absolutely catastrophic, wouldn't it, if a deal is presented to the Commons that has not already been rubber-stamped by the DUP, because if it hasn't been, it's not going to work.
Absolutely, but as far as we're aware, the DUP hasn't yet seen the deal, so we're not sure what's in it. Obviously, there have been extensive talks going on behind the scenes. The DUP has long had 7 red lines, which it says if the deal doesn't address all of those issues, and they include things like, you know, making sure, first of all, that the Act of Union of 1800, so when Northern Ireland became part of Great Britain, that every UK citizen has got to have the same privileges and be on the same footing as everybody else. So that means basically that there can't be any different trade or customs arrangements regarding Northern Ireland as there are at the moment. So it's going to be a very, very difficult, it has been a very difficult deal to negotiate. You've got to please the DUP, you've got to please the European Reform Group of Conservative backbench MPs.
Can I ask about that?
And the EU.
Because we've heard a lot of people have talked about the ERG all weekend. We've been discussing this. They're a little group, right, in the Conservative Party who formed their own little little WhatsApp group.
They're not that little. They're not that little.
Maybe not that little. But why is it so important to keep them on side? Is it just so they don't rebel in a vote? Is that as far as it goes?
It's so they don't rebel in a vote, but it's also, of course, the ERG, in a sense, is representative of all those millions of people, 17 million people who voted for Brexit, who voted to leave the European Union. They, in a sense, are the kind of protectors of that vision. And that's very much, I think, how they're seen by the country, and certainly people like me who, are part of the Vote Leave campaign and voted for Brexit.
People in the country don't necessarily know who they are.
I think you'd be surprised, but I think how many people know, you could argue about how many people even know who their MP is. I think when people have done surveys, it's not actually very many. But they are important. And, I'm hearing rumours that perhaps Steve Baker, the Northern Ireland minister, if the deal isn't going to be accepted by the DUP, what's he going to do? And he's obviously a prominent member of the ERG as well. But you've also got to please the European Union. Yeah. And obviously the European Union isn't going to want to row back on having some kind of final say. It wants the European Court of Justice to be the final arbiter if there's any trade difficulties, customs difficulties. And that's going to be completely unacceptable to the DUP for a foreign court to still have the final say over issues.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of this is down to, when we're talking about Steve Baker, it's people who don't feel like they've been involved enough in the negotiations.
Yes, exactly, that's what he's saying. Yes.
How much truth do you think there is that this hasn't yet been put to the DUP? Because it seems quite hard to believe, doesn't it, if we're recalling all MPs to Parliament tomorrow, we've got a three-line whip. But realistically, if the DUP aren't happy, they could refuse to re-enter power sharing and instalments just permanently frozen.
Yeah, and the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, has said if the DUP doesn't accept this deal, then that's it. It's not going to happen.
So surely it has to be put to them first before it can go to anybody else?
Well, maybe who knows what's happening behind the scenes. We had Rishi Sunak a week last Friday, turned up in Northern Ireland to have a debate and discussions with all parties before he went off to see the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, the next day in Munich to discuss it with her. What did they discuss? We don't know, obviously, but there was talk that it was going to be happening imminently a week ago. Now we're told it's going to be tomorrow. So we're all agog, really. What's going to be in it? How are they going to get around these major issues?
Well, it's interesting though because you said, and obviously, you're no fan of the EU. Right? Well, I suppose a lot of our viewers and listeners are no fan of the EU. And what they said in all of this from the very beginning was, from years ago, was, we're not going to do anything which is going to jeopardise peace in Northern Ireland. That was their central point, so they claimed. Well, there's an argument, isn't there, to say, well, unless you actually back down on a whole host of this sort of stuff, what you're doing is actually jeopardising peace in Northern Ireland. So isn't that a really strong stick to beat them with, to say, you've got to back down on all of this, otherwise there's going to be real problems?
Stephen, I agree with you 100%. And when you see what's happened in Northern Ireland in recent days, I think that brings it very much to the fore that this process is potentially in jeopardy. But will the EU, we just know what they're like from past experience. They're not going to back down easily on this. They're just not. I hope they have. I really do. But as I say, it's one of those big red lines is that there's no control for the EU when it comes to this as far as the DUP is concerned. And so we're just going to carry on with the same old stalemate. Stormont's going to be completely paralysed. There's going to be no effective administration in Northern Ireland. The completely unacceptable, in their terms, Brexit laws and checks that we have at the moment, there'll still be that border in the Irish Sea, and it could just go on and on and on. So fingers crossed there is a deal that's been done, because that's got to benefit everybody. But yeah, I'm very excited to see what it's going to be.
Yes. Ultimately...
Is excited the right word?
I don't know.
It's been a while, hasn't it?
It has.
Pessimistic or optimistic?
Oh, that's a really hard one. I think I'm possibly pessimistic on the basis that there are just so many people to please. And as that saying goes, you can't please all of the people all of the time. And when you've got really difficult political, emotional and legal issues like this, if Rishi Sunak can pull it off, he's pulled a rabbit out of a hat and good on him.
Yeah, we shall see. Suzanne, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you so much.
I don't know. I sort of think... I cannot understand politically why they would be sort of doing all of this if there wasn't something of real significance that they are convinced is going to change all of this.
Watch this space. Yeah.
Maybe that's why I'm not a politician. Now, as children, many of us, far too many of us really, encounter death, relative, family, friend, even just a pet, actually. But they do say having a pet is very good for helping children to learn about death. But is it the responsibility of schools to teach children how to deal with bereavement?
Well, this is the question that many are asking after a petition to include bereavement support in the national curriculum reached 10,000 signatures.
Well, let's talk to the CEO of asylum. That's Canon Yvonne Richmond-Tulloch. Good morning to you. It's really good to talk to you this morning because I know, obviously, at a loss, you deal with people who are suffering with bereavement. I mean, I find it extraordinary because it is an issue which every single one of us has to deal with at some point in our lives, and yet we seem very unprepared for it.
Yes, absolutely. Just to say that we signpost, at a loss signposts, for very good reason, because of what you've just been talking about, that people don't understand death, and yet every single person will encounter death sooner or later. If they don't die young themselves, we will all encounter death sooner or later. And we seem to be a society where we don't understand death. We've had decades of not really talking about death enough, and death being removed from our experience, our daily experience. You know, our grandparents, in their generation, people would die in the home, people would be involved more in the death by the communities gathering round, and children would naturally be involved in the conversations and the whole experience of it all. But it's not just children, it's all of us as adults now. We are not involved so much. People are dying in hospitals. They're dying in the bodies are in funeral directors and so on, and we're removed from the whole experience and not really familiar with the process of grief and all that the impact that death has on us.
Yes, is there something in there about being British and the British way of dealing with grief and dealing with death and dealing with loss? Because, you know, I think of my Irish family, and, you know, when someone dies, they're very, very quickly, but they're in an open casket in the living room, and everybody, even children, are encouraged to come in and say goodbye to their loved one in that casket. It does give them quite an early understanding of what death is and how grief is not something to be scared of, it's something to be part of life. But as a British person, it's not the same, is it? I mean, you do hear often about someone who's experienced a loss and people seeing them in the street and crossing the road. We are quite awkward, aren't we, often as British people when we're dealing with death and with loss?
Yes, it does seem to be British culture that's the worst at this. Many other cultures do it so much better. We've lost, as you say, that culture, that tendency to all gather and be together, and so therefore we've lost the language of death and understanding about the grief journey. And that's something that many of us in the bereavement sector are trying really hard to rectify. We want to bring the conversation of death back, in our schools, in our conversation. The media are doing a brilliant job of helping with all of this. We've talked for a long time about death denial, and it's almost as if we've tried. We've got to a stage as individuals of convincing ourselves that we're not going to die, that it'll only happen to us one day in the future when we're 90 or something, and therefore we're not even accepting death for ourselves. And then when somebody else dies, it comes as a big shock upon us.
Just as you were saying that, I was thinking of Stephen Sutton, who I had some contact with. I mean, it's going back a few years now. But he was that 19-year-old who had cancer, who spent years, actually, well, a couple of years, going around and talking about what he was going through and remaining incredibly positive, but still knowing the end was coming. And then when he passed away, there was, he raised millions and millions of pounds on Just Giving and what have you. And I wonder I always find people like him absolutely inspirational, because it's not about running away from death. It really is facing death in the face. I mean, the whole idea from the church of, death has lost its sting.
Yes, what we really encourage people to do is to what we're talking about, reach a point of encouraging people to have good deaths. The best thing that we can give ourselves and our loved ones is the opportunity to say goodbye to people, to leave this world in a really good way. And if we can do that, that sort of preparing things in advance, having the conversations, having those difficult conversations with people, the forgiveness side of things. So if we can do that, it can make bereavement so much easier for those who are left behind, because a lot of the issues that we deal with, it's not just about missing the person. A lot of grief is about dealing with all the unresolved issues, and the impact of grief can be lessened significantly if we can talk about death in advance and we can prepare for those good deaths.
Sorry to jump in, Ellie. Can I just ask then about sudden death? Because obviously that's a situation where there is no opportunity for any sort of resolution for that. I mean, that is literally, the shock of that to families involved is obviously very, very difficult.
Yes, it's obviously we can't always prepare for death, and we can do, but we can do a certain amount because we can put our affairs in order, even if we're not expecting to die now. Yes, I mean I was bereaved suddenly of my first husband several years ago now. The impact upon somebody when somebody dies, out of the blue, is huge. Absolutely huge. And what happens for most people is they're shocked and numb for quite some while. And going back to this lack of understanding in society, what can often happen is that people can think that people are coping well, when actually the impact hasn't hit them really in terms of the sorrow and the grief and going on that grief journey. For people can be numb for quite some while, and people can think they're doing well, even and very often up to the point of the funeral. And it's usually after the funeral when everybody else has backed away because they think, oh, they're okay now, that's that done and dusted, and they seem to be fine. It's after the funeral when the real pain starts to hit, and it's months and even years down the line when things can go wrong for people and can go bad for people, and people can find themselves several months down the line very depressed and having all sorts of issues that need to be faced and need to be supported.
Well, look, I hope it is something that does get talked about more, Reverend. It's been really good to talk to you this morning about that. Thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate it.
It's so good, isn't it, to hear someone talk so honestly and openly about grief.
I just think it is one of those. I'm a great believer in talking about death, actually, and about just getting stuff in order. All the wills are done and all sorted, because I hate to admit it, but it's
it's a fact of life, isn't it?
It's going to happen at some point, and so the best you can do is plan around your own demise to help those who are left behind.
But I do think we need to talk about it more. I think more people need to be like you, because I do think as British people, and the Reverend was touching upon that, but as British people we do shy away from it. We are awkward around the subject, and it's a fact of life, unfortunately, that it's going to happen to us all, isn't it?
And I do think if you know someone who's lost someone, I think as Brits we tend to say, well, I don't know what to say to them. All you need to just go do is say hello. You're not going to say anything that is going to help. You're not going to help, your words are not going to make it any better, but just being there and just saying hello and a touch on the shoulder
and a listener
can mean the world to some people.
Yeah.
Anyway, worth bearing all that in mind.
Yeah, do let us know what you think about that. GBViews at gbnews.uk.
Now, across England, there are as many as 225 national nature reserves, but the criteria to gain that status has changed to make these spaces more accessible to us, the general public.
Well, our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper paid a visit to the first area to become a nature reserve under the new guidelines.
The flashes of Wigan and Lee. Once the site for several of the county's coal mines, the area is now home to many of the region's flora and fauna. Wigan and Lee is an area famous for its involvement in Britain's industrial revolution, but now it's having its own ecological revolution as an area the size of almost 1,000 rugby league pitches has been made into a national nature reserve.
What we've got to do is we've got to bring wildlife back to landscapes where it's been lost. And I think the Wigan and Lee flashes is just such an inspiring example, because this is a landscape this was black in the 1950s and 1960s. There was mining still going on here into the 1990s.
A scheme formerly focused purely on conservation and research, Wigan and Lee is the first to become an NNR under a new set of criteria.
What the new criteria about really, it's recognising the importance for people. This is a place where you've literally got terraced streets backing onto incredible wildlife habitats. And we've got, 300,000 people within a couple of minutes, cycle ride. That's an absolutely incredible resource. So to recognise that nationally, that was part, I guess, of why this designation is so special. And it's brilliant for the people of Wigan and Lee.
But it won't just benefit the local people. This nationally significant project will also provide protected habitats for many iconic British species.
So there's about 800 hectares of mixed willow and reed bed and meadows and grasslands. So it's really important for a range of species such as bittern, water rail, hare and our favourite, the willow tit.
Deemed in urgent need of help, 2.5% of the UK's willow tit population will now be protected by the site's NNR status. So, it's good for the animals, it's good for the people. What about good for the environment?
So the nature reserve is around about 2 degrees cooler than the surrounding urban land. So that's really good in helping to keep the area cool, and the habitats, the trees, the grasslands, the reed beds and the mosslands that we have in this area are all sequestering carbon, making it much better for the sort of carbon equation, taking that carbon dioxide out of the air.
With huge benefits across the board, the flashes of Wigan and Lee have been truly transformed. From a heartland of smoke and coal into a hub for wildlife to flourish. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Do you know, that's what I don't know why I'm sat so close to you. That's I was just about to say, actually, that's what I'm going to do later. I said I wanted to go for a walk in a nature reserve.
It's lovely. I mean, they're fantastic places.
Yeah, I love to see all the wildlife. Yeah, lovely. No, you can't. Great outdoors.
What to be said. We've got a lot of space in this country, which hopefully we won't build all over in the next 30 years. And I just think it's nice to treasure that and enjoy it, get back to nature, smell the flowers.
Nothing better, is there?
Anyway, look, don't go anywhere. Aidan's going to be here in just a couple of minutes. We're looking ahead to the League Cup final this afternoon.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone.
My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. Still lots more to come on the programme.
Yeah, at 10 to 8, we're going to be hearing about the ongoing cost of living crisis affecting poorest parts of the country and what is being done to try to support people.
Then we're going to head out to the countryside at 8:10 to see why the UK is currently heading towards a vegetable shortage. We'll be hearing from one farmer who outlines just how bleak the situation is, both for the consumer and farmers across the country.
Very nice message from David this morning. Hi, David. Thank you for that. He said, thanks for giving both sides of every story. We live in uncertain times and mainstream media only gives the establishment side of things. Not exclusive, but I know what you mean. It's not... It doesn't quite show all both sides. Thank you, Stephen and Ellie, for brightening a dull day.
No.
Well, we try to be bright, but if you want things brightening up, then you need this fella. The man from Del Monte, Aidan McGee.
I thought you were going to say the man from Miami Vice.
Oh.
That's the look I was going for. But
Don Johnson.
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, you need to... but if you want to be Miami Vice, you've got to roll the sleeves up.
Oh, yeah, I'll do that later on, shall I?
Yeah.
I don't want to get creased for now. I've got a special guest on the line.
Yeah, go on.
But,
what have you got for us then?
Well, look, Newcastle are playing in the Carabao Cup final this afternoon. It's the first time they've played in a cup final, a showpiece final, since way back in Alan Shearer's time in 1999. They haven't won a major trophy since 1968. They've had all this money coming in and they've had a little bit of a drop-off in the last few weeks, but nonetheless, they've had a really, really good season. And I want to bring someone in now with a unique perspective on this, and that's Gavin Peacock, the former Newcastle United attacking midfielder, Chelsea, QPR, Bournemouth and Gillingham as well. And he has a unique perspective on this, Gavin, because you were at Newcastle in the early days, in the early 90s, when Kevin Keegan was in charge. And what a lot of people don't realise is that you had a family link going back long before that, going into childhood.
Yeah, absolutely, Aidan. And you can see you're not getting an unbiased opinion today from this pundit. I am rooting for Newcastle all the way, even if I upset the Man U supporters. Yeah, my dad's family, my dad, Keith Peacock, played for Charlton Athletic for 17 years, but his family were all from South Shields. So I was going up there for holidays as a young kid, and one of the first kits I had was a Newcastle kit. So when I signed from Bournemouth to Newcastle in the early 90s, my granddad, Tom, my dad's dad, was a very humble Geordie man who fought in World War II in the Navy. When I signed for Newcastle, it made his life. And I'm wearing this shirt today. This is my Newcastle shirt I wore in 1992 when we stayed up against Leicester, last game of the season.
You scored the goal that day, Gavin, as I recall, didn't you?
I scored a goal. Yeah, I scored a goal. We won 2-1. We stayed up, and the next season we got promotion to the Premier League with Kevin Keegan, and it was the beginning of the entertainers. But my granddad Tom, he'd had a stroke that year that we stayed up, and I took this shirt to him, and I gave it to him, and he couldn't say much in the hospital at the time, but he kept this shirt to the day he died, and he never washed it because he said, "You sweated blood for my team," and he said that's what it's all about. And I think that's what it means to the Newcastle fans. They see the players going out there and sweating blood for the team that they would, die to play for. It means everything. And under Eddie Howe, things have changed around so much over the last year, and you can just see signs of real revival there. And the influx of Geordie fans into London has just been amazing.
We're seeing pictures now, actually, Gavin. They're all in Trafalgar Square last night. Just tell me, though, you have washed that shirt since you wore it in 1992, haven't you? It hasn't still got sweat stains on it.
It's been washed now, but my granddad would have been proud.
And just talk to me about the game today, then, because obviously a huge occasion, as you've mentioned, but can they beat Manchester United? I mean, Man United have shown signs that they're in a resurgent form and they could get back to the kind of form they were showing under Sir Alex Ferguson all those years ago.
Sure. Newcastle have done phenomenal. They're a real force to be reckoned with. They've got attacking power. They can sit back and defend and play on the break, as they did with Arsenal at the beginning of the year and got a decent result, or they can go for it. But they've tailed off in recent weeks, and Manchester United, the informed team. But cup finals are cup finals, and they're different. The goalkeeper situation would be a bit concerning, I think, for some of the fans, with Karius coming in for maybe his first game and all of that. But I think that the fact that the fans there, that the Toonami will be like an extra man for them. So I think everything's possible for Newcastle. And I think this is just a genesis, a real beginning for them of years of success to come. But it won't be easy. Manchester United are a good team, great attacking power. They got, obviously, Rashford is in great form. And I think it's set up for a phenomenal final. But I'm going for a 2-1 win for Newcastle.
Just quickly, Gav, before we go, you're watching, obviously, in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. What's the time zone there? What time will you... It's not going to be on a difficult hour for you, is it?
Well, we're 7 hours behind, so I'll be doing my best to watch it wherever I can, or at least record it, and nobody tells me the results. My cousin Simon is at the cup final, so, Geordie family, he's travelling down, so he's there. He's going to be texting me updates anyway.
Thanks very much indeed, Gavin. Great to hear from you. We really appreciate you joining us as well. We know you've had to stay up late, and we really, really hope you enjoy the game today. We've got to stay neutral on GB News, but I'm hoping for you that you might get the result you want. Anyway, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks.
And I love the story behind his shirt.
Yeah.
It's amazing. That passion.
It was known as the barcode shirt at the time because the Newcastle fans were annoyed with that shirt, the design by Umbro, because the width of the stripes was all different widths, like a barcode that you might find in Tesco's.
Yeah. No, I think it's quite nice. It takes me back.
Well, it's funny. I've got a joke for you, actually.
Oh, no.
Here we go.
There's a couple in Tesco's and they had a barcode wrapped around them. Apparently, they weren't an item.
Oh, get out.
Oh, I went...
Did you get it late, or were you just being polite?
Oh.
It just takes me a few seconds. Anyway, I got there in the end. I was
Gavin's a Christian pastor, by the way. He had a complete about turn in his life. Yeah, went to Canada and got involved in the clergy.
Oh, well.
Really? Wow.
Good for him.
Another great story.
Yeah.
I'm full of them.
You are full of them. You're just full of terrible jokes.
Oh, dear.
Honestly.
Dad jokes.
Anyway, we've got much more to come for you, including, are you ready for this?
Oh.
In case it takes you a second to sink in. We're going to go through the papers.
Stop, behave.
Just a moment with Tom and Emma. It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you, 7:37. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. On death and talking to children about death, I'm a little bit surprised, but, all views are welcome. Steve says, it seems to me that the school curriculum is becoming more to do with touchy-feely things rather than education. Further dumbing down of the children of the future, methinks, because I'm talking about death in schools. Christina says, as a retired teacher, I'm wary about influencing children too much. By talking about death to children, you might make them anxious. Can we not let children be children and stop piling adult concepts onto fragile minds?
It is difficult.
Then they do have to deal with death, don't they? The death of a pet, the death of a grandparent, the death... Should it be an adult concept or should it just be a human concept?
It's part of life, isn't it?
I'm a little bit surprised. I normally agree with teachers when you email in. I'm not so sure about that one, Christina.
Yeah, let us know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk. It's certainly a difficult conversation to have, and I think it would have to be done in a very specific way when you're talking to children. But I do think, as Brits, we do need to talk about it more, definitely.
I think so. But then again, you can quite happily disagree with me. I could very well be wrong. Normally am.
No, that's not true. It's not true.
Oh, I don't know. I am. I'm told that at home. I've realised at home now...
You get in trouble at home, do you?
...that I am wrong.
All the time?
Yeah, but the problem is, you know, you sort of go... it's true.
Oh.
I am actually wrong most of the time.
Oh, yeah. Is that someone there?
Someone agreeing?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Well timed, yep. And that's funny, because at home I'm always right. So.
Yes, morning, Gigi.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the newspapers this morning. We'll start with the Sunday Times. Says the Prime Minister is going to get Brexit done and could reveal his deal on the Northern Ireland Protocol. We're expecting it tomorrow. It says without the blessing of the DUP, which would be extraordinary.
Really would. The Mail leads on turmoil in the Conservative Party over allegations that Rishi Sunak is using his upcoming visits to Paris and Berlin to schmooze EU nations.
1 in 100 police officers in England and Wales faced criminal charges last year, according to The Observer.
The Sunday People leads on the news that Matt Hancock has set up a TV company following his stint on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here.
That's so someone will employ him.
Well...
Employ himself. Oh, I don't know.
I don't want to say anything.
Be officially a media professional then. Let's go through the papers with editor of Spiked, Tom Slater, and journalist and political consultant Emma Burnell. Morning, you two. Emma, let's kick off with some heavy stuff, should we, in the Observer. 1 in 100 police officers in England and Wales faced a criminal charge last year. I struggle to believe that, because it just seems extraordinary. 1%.
1%, yeah, it is extraordinary and it's appalling. There's a phrase that's quite often used in politics, which is lawmakers can't be lawbreakers. I would say that's doubly true for those who enforce the laws. We've got to be able to trust the police, and I really, really worry about how much trust is breaking down in the police. And that used to be something we were worried in particular with just BME communities, things like that. But I think it's much broader now. Women in general are just, you know, if you're stopped by a single policeman, I would question what to do in that circumstance now in a way that I never would have done growing up.
Whereas the reality is, I mean, this is the thing, the reality is you would be in no more danger now than you would have been back in the past.
Well, no, that's not. I mean, if this is the case, apparently this has gone up by 590%.
But it's stuff that's aware of.
Well, maybe, but I do think that, I mean, awareness is important, but I think we really need to think about how we're recruiting to the police and who we're recruiting to the police, because it just can't be the case that this is seen as a way of getting out of being able to be a lawbreaker with impunity.
And those checks need to be done.
Absolutely.
I mean, I was at a press conference a few weeks ago, and the only good thing out of all of this is the new commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, was saying, look, this is going to happen. In the next 6 months, we're going to see 2 to 3 police officers in court every single week, which was remarkable, really, to hear him say. But at least he's accepting that there is a problem. This is more than just a few bad apples. But at the core, he was saying there are very good police officers, the majority. 99%.
It must be so frustrating for that 99%. And they need this to happen as much as anybody else does. You know, we want a police force we can trust. That majority of the police force want to be trusted, but there does have to be work done on what has gone so clearly institutionally wrong.
And it starts here, doesn't it? We're just facing the music.
Absolutely.
Criminal charges, and we are going to see these awful court cases, but hopefully out of that, as you say, reform is on its way. Tom, let's look at the Mail now, shall we? And Rishi Sunak being accused of dragging the King into politics. Tell us a bit more about this.
Yes, so a lot of anger amongst kind of Brexiteer Tory backbenchers about the fact that King Charles is being lined up for a sort of charm offensive with Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, and so on. And that, essentially, it's always been a sort of perennial problem with Brexit, which is to the extent to which you bring the royals into it. Also, there was always these scandals in the run-up to it about Michael Gove, suggesting that maybe the Queen had backed Brexit, or all these different sort of things coming out in the newspapers. You then had this, again, this sort of issue where King Charles is effectively one of the most, the most senior, most experienced, at least, diplomat in the country in so many respects. And yet, of course, there is this reticence, given the fact that Brexit is seen as such a divisive issue and so on, that Rishi Sunak is effectively taking King Charles and lending his seal of approval to a deal that could also still be quite contentious. Some of the reporting in there even suggests that the agreement was at one point going to be presented as the Windsor Agreement, which I'm sure would never have flown in the first place. And that concern that effectively just the government of the day is kind of using the Royals as a way to give some credibility to what might be quite a contentious policy. It's a difficult one, but at the same time you do sort of wonder, would it not have been easier just to keep the royal family out of this so as not to get this kind of backlash, I suppose?
Maybe. You're not a royal fan.
I'm not a big royalist, but we have a monarchy, we have a constitutional monarchy. They have a role to play as diplomats. I think where Tom is right on this, it just feels a slightly clunky. It's that classic Rishi Sunak, ever so slightly clunkiness in terms of his public presentation of these things. So it's kind of going hell for leather in this direction, but bringing so many other aspects into it that just feel a little forced. Charles is one of our senior diplomats. I don't want to have a constitutional monarchy, but I live in one, and that is the case. So, of course, it's his role to go out and make the case for Britain wherever that needs to be made, and that includes in the EU. But just the timing and the presentation just, again, feels just that little bit off.
A little bit off, yeah, no, perhaps so. Can we have a look, because we've teased this a little bit, I want to look in the Sunday People. Matt Hancock, who is now... I cannot understand how this works. He's set up his own TV company following being on I'm a Celebrity. For what? For why? How? Who? What?
For Matt Hancock, as far as I can tell. I mean, I could set up a TV company tomorrow, so could you. I mean, you two would probably actually get further with it than I would. But, you know, setting up a TV company does not mean you are going to be on the telly, I'm afraid. You have to pitch these ideas that you make to broadcasters who may or may not want to then buy them. Yeah. So it just feels like yet another Hancock vanity project. I mean, the man knows no shame, no boundary to his vanity.
And this is all part of him pursuing a media career, isn't it, Tom?
And I wish he would be upfront about that. I think he'd get less flack if he was, because he's tried to present his media career, his burgeoning media career, as effectively an act of public service. I'm going on I'm a Celebrity to talk about dyslexia, when he mentioned it a handful of times. I'm going to donate my fee to charity. The small print suggested it was a proportion of that fee, not
very small proportion.
And similarly with this, I want to make documentaries about, I think it's assisted suicide is one, there's other things that he's concerned about. But again, you can't help but feel this is about the fact that he's got a bit of a taste of the limelight. He seems to like it.
Why would we want to hear him do a documentary? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't...
I mean, others have done it. I mean, look at Portillo, for example. And I mean, he's...
Ed Balls.
His train, you know, those train documentaries and things that he did, very popular, and it turns out it's an area in which he's very informed. Perhaps Matt Hancock has got, you know, he's very informed on assisted suicide. I don't know.
But the thing about Portillo and surprisingly Ed Balls, I think, is that they are good media performers.
Yeah.
Whereas Matt Hancock always comes across as just a bit weird.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. What time? So, Zach in the gallery, tell me what time we need to move out. Oh, we've got 1 minute.
But it will be interesting, just a last word on that Matt Hancock story, is what do his constituents think of all of this? Well, it's one thing after another, it seems.
Well, he doesn't have to care anymore, does he? He's not trying to be re-elected.
He's out, but, you know.
No. So we've got 40 seconds, Tom, to talk about roast dinners in the Sunday Times.
Yes, so people are having fewer roast dinners because of the cost of living crisis. 36% of Brits are cooking a traditional meal less frequently than a year ago because of, again, the sky-high costs of actually putting your oven on for that long.
It costs a fortune to put an oven on.
Well, this is exactly it. So, heretically, some people are exploring doing their Yorkshire puddings in the microwave and using air fryers and things. So these are the sort of
I've done a roast chicken in an air fryer.
There we go.
I wouldn't recommend. I wouldn't. No. It can be done, I've been told, but I haven't mastered it.
A roast can be very cheap. I know meat, it can be. I know you've still got to cook it, but, you know, things like if you don't go with a meat and get a meat alternative that can be really cheap, £1 for a thing, and chuck it in the oven.
What would you have then?
Well, because I'm vegetarian.
Veggie, yeah. What would you have? Nut roast?
A corn roast.
You can. There are lovely nut roasts out there. I mean,
I'm
not a veggie, but I like to mix it up a bit, and I've had a beautiful veggie nut roast for.
Yeah, but they can be quite as easy. You want a great slab of corn in this case, and it's cheap. And it doesn't take long to cook.
Yeah.
In the oven.
In the oven.
Yeah.
So a roast is an easy, cheap option for me. all things considered. But there you go. I'm a skinflint. Actually, sticking on it, we'll talk to you two a little bit later on. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tom.
But with
Thanks,
the
then.
cost of living squeezing household finances, a confidential support service has been travelling across, well, it's just the capital at the moment, but 35 different locations.
Yes, the charity Debt Free Advice says so many people are experiencing money concerns for the first time, so they have been incredibly busy. Lisa Hartle has the story.
Many who've stepped onto the advice bus over the last 3 months are experiencing financial difficulties for the first time. The Debt Free Advice Service started their tour of the capital after the huge rise in the number of people affected by the cost of living crisis. Kensington Leisure Centre is one of their last stops.
So unsurprisingly, the cost of living crisis is having a real struggle on people's pockets. If we look at the number of incoming inquiries to our service from this January compared to a year ago, the number of inquiries has gone up by 50%. And what people are affected by is their housing costs. So for the last 17 years that our service has been around, we've seen that people with rent arrears and council tax arrears as the top 2 debts. But the first time now, we're seeing utility debts as the 3rd most common debt that people are coming to us with. And utility debts have also gone up by 46% for electric and 43% for gas for the same year.
The service offers advice on what help people might have if they're struggling to pay bills.
I come here for debt advice today, and they were very quite helpful to me, Lisa. I wanted help with my council tax debt, and it's being sorted now. They gave me the link with a couple of organisations where I can get this done.
Some of the people stepping off the bus told me it was a relief to be able to talk to someone.
I think second only to kind of health circumstances, nobody speaks about their finances. As a country and a culture, we're quite prude in that respect. We don't like to speak about it, but it is so common. In London, we know over half the people are worried about their finances, so there's nothing to be ashamed about. Our team see this day in, day out. They're experts and they really want to help you.
Aside from providing confidential advice to people, the purpose of the bus was also to advertise the service, which, although will no longer be on the road, is still providing help either in person or on the phone. Lisa Hartle, GB News, London.
Well, how do you go about making your money stretch a little bit further, or just organising yourself in such a way that it works better for you? Let's talk to Lisa Woodley, who's a TikTok influencer who's written a book revealing how she transformed her family's finances. We haven't got Karen.
No. Well, we do have Karen, actually, who's the CEO and founder of the Unbiased podcast, and she joins us now. So Lisa's idea, I think it's called cash stuffing. We are talking about her idea, but Lisa's not with us, unfortunately.
I'm very confused, Karen, but it's...
Sorry, I'm not Lisa.
It's what you get.
No, but Lisa's idea is cash stuffing, right? So if I've got this right, so you have your budget, you take it all out in cash, and then you stuff it into little envelopes for each thing. So like your weekly shop, your takeaways, your treats, things like that. And once you've got rid of the cash in the envelope, there's no more. And that's how she budgets. What do you make of that idea?
Well, this is really interesting. You know, Lisa's amassed tens of thousands of followers. So it shows us that lots of people are concerned about their finances. I think that actually it's a great idea, and it works on 2 fronts. One is that you're planning ahead. So you'll be your meal planning, only buying what you need, and also that you are ensuring that you can't spend any more than you actually have. So I think, as Lisa's shown, that if you are weekly planning and ensuring that you're understanding what you're spending and where you're spending it, you can then stay in control of your finances. So I think that actually it's a great idea. I do think that actually you need to be really, really disciplined in order to make it work. You do have to sit down for that 5 minutes, which isn't a long time, but every week you need to ensure that you're working out what it is you're spending each week and in what buckets they go in. I also think that you're using cash, and less and less places are accepting cash. So I think the perfect outcome would be to be able to use a card and be disciplined. But I know people then run the risk of those impulse purchases, or going shopping on an empty stomach and putting more in your basket than you actually need for the week ahead. But overall, it's a fantastic idea because lots of people are struggling with their finances at the moment, and they really do need to take control and really, for their own well-being, ensure that they're confident they've got enough money to last the week or the month. And it's interesting, the cash stuffing method that Lisa is helping people understand does help you make those small changes. And if you can save that £10 per week, that adds up. That can be, £500 by the end of the year. Or if you're able to put away £20 a week because you're planning better, you're saving over £1,000. And that means you could put that towards, I don't know, longer term savings, such as retirement, or something more fun like a holiday.
It does make a big difference. It's interesting because there will be people who think, as you said, look, oh, can I really do this? Can I really sort of get the cash out, split it up, take the time to do that? If you're in a desperate situation, you're going to make the time to do that, aren't you? I mean, if you think you can't be bothered to do it, it probably means maybe you don't need to do it. But for those people who are really in that situation, what a great idea. I mean, that's the point. It's meeting a need, isn't it?
I think what it really helps people do is understand where their money's going. And I think lots of people, myself included, sometimes you've got bills come through and you're, I didn't know about that direct debit, I'd forgotten, or didn't understand I was spending amounts of money on that top-up shop in the week. So what it really helps you do is understand where your money's going so you can then get control of it. So I think that's the best thing about this plan. If you do get to planning, taking the cash out, etc. Once you understand where your money's going, I think you can move to, your Apple Pay or your cards and keep going with it, and it's easier. And I know that some bills, such as your mortgage, for example, they will be taken out. You can't pay those in cash. So there will be a proportion of what you're spending that does go out that's not cash driven. But it's really the sitting down and the planning that means that you're going to be in a better place. And at unbiased.co.uk, we have lots of tips around budgeting and also helpful information and case studies of where people have done it before. So please search for Unbiased Budgeting and you'll also find information there to help you with this.
Information is power. That's very true. Karen, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. If you fancy doing that, or if you've done it, let us know. Because I do think, if you are really struggling, then these sort of things can really help. Talking about books earlier on, weren't we?
We were, yes. Roald Dahl and now Ian Fleming. And the James Bond novels potentially being rewritten to make them more woke.
Paul says, please leave these wonderful books alone. I'm becoming quite sick of everything being cancelled and rewritten in my eyes. I find it offensive.
Yeah, Simon says, I'm sick to death of this movement. God forbid they try rewriting the classics. And that's the point, isn't it? Where's the line?
Yeah, Betty says it's appalling that they're being rewritten to appease anyone who may be offended. Why can't they just add a foreword saying the content was written in the language of the time? I think it's a very valid point. If you've got a view, gbviews at gbnews.uk.
Lots to come after this short break, so do stay with us.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
The Prime Minister says he's giving it everything to get a new Brexit deal over the line.
Morning to you. It's 8 o'clock on Sunday, the 26th of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie.
Here are your top stories this morning. The Prime Minister is on the brink of completing a new deal which could finally see the Northern Ireland Protocol resolved. But Rishi Sunak still faces a challenge to get the deal through Parliament, with the Northern Ireland Minister reportedly on resignation watch after being frozen out of the negotiations.
The Farming Union is warning the current vegetable shortage in the UK could be the tip of the iceberg. Pun intended. Factors including the war in Ukraine and climate change have made harvest more challenging than ever for farmers. We'll be getting to the root of the problem.
Very good, yes. And we'll be meeting the amazing man who is rescuing lions from Kyiv. Lionel Delange is helping zoos and naturalists move endangered animals from areas in danger of gunfire and artillery to the safety of his reserve in South Africa.
Loads of you getting in touch on a whole host of different issues this morning. If you want to join our conversation, please do. We'd absolutely love to hear from you. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, Rishi Sunak is on the brink of completing a new deal on the Northern Ireland Protocol, so we're told.
Yes, the Prime Minister held a conference call for Cabinet Ministers and is expected to make a statement to the House of Commons tomorrow.
Well, the Irish Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, said the deal was inching towards a conclusion. But what could that look like for Northern Ireland? Let's talk to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Tom, I mean, what do you reckon? This is a pretty big gamble, isn't it, for the Prime Minister?
It certainly is, and to be honest, it's a row that Rishi Sunak could have avoided. He could have just sort of kept the arrangements as they were, put Northern Ireland in the too difficult box, and moved on with his other domestic priorities. Because, of course, we've heard ad infinitum from the Prime Minister of his 5 priorities in government, and none of them are to do with the Northern Ireland Protocol. But clearly he sees this as an outstanding issue of Brexit that needs to be resolved. It is unacceptable that Northern Ireland has gone without a government for over a year now. And really this is a negotiation that has now spanned the length of 3 prime ministers. It was started, of course, back when the DUP left those power-sharing arrangements. Then Lord Frost was conducting those negotiations. It then moved upon Lord Frost's resignation to Liz Truss as Foreign Secretary, talking with her counterpart in the EU, Maros Sefcovic, and this has now, of course, moved to the responsibility jointly of James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, Chris Heaton-Harris, the Northern Ireland Secretary, and Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister. Now, this deal has been a long time in the works, and we've understood various bits of what might be contained within it. Principally is this idea of green lanes and red lanes. Goods that are travelling from Great Britain to Northern Ireland that currently, under the terms of the Brexit deal, have to be checked. Well, they would, under the terms of this proposal, go in a green lane. As long as they're staying in Northern Ireland, most of those checks would go. However, there would also be red lanes for goods that were likely to travel from Northern Ireland into the Republic and into the wider EU. Those would still need to be checked, although that's a minority of goods. That's the big idea behind getting rid of these damaging checks within the United Kingdom. And it's something that does seem to have a lot of legs. There are other ideas as well. Currently, the United Kingdom can't cut VAT in Northern Ireland. There are restrictions around state aid rules as well, because Northern Ireland has to stay under those EU rules. Well, there is talk about a democratic deficit mechanism, some say for Northern Ireland, in rules that affect Northern Ireland too. But I have to say, it is all very vague. We haven't seen detail. I've been speaking to members of Parliament this week who have been given indications, rough overviews, but no detail, no idea of what's actually in this text. We were supposed to potentially see this text around this time last week, although clearly there have been some delays. The DUP has not been particularly happy with what has been discussed so far, and the Prime Minister has been insisting this week that it wasn't sewn up last week, that there have been more talks ongoing, but now the deal is very, very close.
Yep, and we're hoping to hear more detail, hopefully, tomorrow morning. And Tom, why are you in Leicester for us this morning?
Well, I am here in Leicester to conduct the People's Panel for Camilla Tominey's show this morning. We're going to be talking not just about the Northern Ireland Protocol, but some of the other big issues affecting the wider country as well. What do the people of Leicester think about the situation of politics at the moment? We'll hopefully be digging into that a little bit later on.
Lovely stuff.
Brilliant, Tom.
We'll see all that at 9:30 this morning. Let's talk now to Harry Phibbs from Conservative Home. Harry, morning to you.
Morning.
I mean, this is going to be extraordinary, isn't it? Unless the DUP are already on side with this, the Prime Minister's on a hide into nothing.
I think that it's very difficult for him. The fundamental is that the Northern Ireland Protocol relies on goodwill from the European Union. I mean, normally with trade, there's a mutual benefit with trade, and therefore everybody's got an interest in being practical and reasonable and having it going as smoothly as possible. I think in terms of the European Union, there's a political aspect to it, that they're wanting to punish us for Brexit. They're wanting to be vexatious and unreasonable in the way they apply things, so they can say to other countries, look, this is what happens. And in a way, for Northern Ireland, it's a kind of arrangement that Theresa May would have had for the whole of the United Kingdom. It's almost as if it's a colony of the European Union, where Northern Ireland, the European Union is able to impose laws on it, astonishingly, not just over matters where it's things that are exported to the European Union, but goods within the United Kingdom, things that Northern Ireland is selling, firms in Northern Ireland selling within Northern Ireland, or to the rest of us in the United Kingdom, they have to follow European Union laws even in those cases. So I think it'll be very difficult to come up with such a big change that that they would regard as satisfactory.
Harry, we just heard there from our political correspondent Tom Harwood, who said that Rishi Sunak could have avoided this issue altogether, could have left things the way they were. He has taken a political gamble here, hasn't he, in terms of his political reputation. I mean, if he can't get the DUP on side with this, they could refuse to re-enter into power sharing in Northern Ireland, and that would effectively leave Stormont frozen, wouldn't it?
Yes, I think if he doesn't get the if he doesn't get the DUP on side, then people will think, well, you can have this change, but you haven't got cross-community consent. I mean, the Northern Ireland Protocol was always meant to be subsidiary to the Good Friday Agreement, and the Good Friday Agreement, of course, you need both sides, both communities in Northern Ireland to agree to it. I mean, it was also, the Northern Ireland Protocol was meant to be temporary. I mean, we should be able to move towards technological solutions to where there's genuine concern about trade in terms of smuggling or whatever. So it shouldn't be necessary to have the current arrangement. And of course, the alternative that Boris Johnson and Liz Truss were putting forward was to really have a clean break with the Northern Ireland Protocol bill to say, right, OK, this isn't working, and therefore we're going to cease applying it. And that bill, that legislation, would empower the government to do it. I can't understand why he doesn't allow that legislation to continue and then say, right, let's try these improvements. Let's see if the European Union is more reasonable. Otherwise, we will pull out of the whole thing. I can't understand why he's dropping that safeguard. And I'm pessimistic, frankly. I think he's, Rishi Sunak. He's a technocrat and wants to get involved in the detail and wants to get fiddle around with the wording. I think the whole situation is so bad. I don't think that'll be enough.
Yeah, but Harry, you said before you think a lot of this is political and the EU wanting to punish us. If we effectively ripped up, as Boris, with the Northern Ireland bill, the protocol bill, and as Boris Johnson's suggesting, it's effectively just ripping up the protocol, then you are going to anger the EU. You are looking at the potential of, trade wars in all of this? I mean, it could be an absolute disaster for us, couldn't it?
I don't think so. No, I don't. I don't believe that the European Union would want to have a trade war with us. I mean, they obviously, if we weren't applying the Northern Ireland Protocol, they could then say that they would want to change the trade rules with them. But ultimately, that would they would be causing themselves a lot of harm. And really, the motive they would have, where a huge market for them, would be to continue in a normal way that they would with other countries around the world, and to go back to a sensible arrangement of having trade operating in a practical, smooth way, rather than applying things in this astonishingly vexatious way that they have been.
OK, Harry, we've got to leave it there. Really good to talk to you this morning. Thanks very much indeed. Your views on that will be very welcome this morning. And I mean, Harry disagrees with the idea that it would spark trade wars and things. I don't know. The EU has proved itself to have a punishing. I was going to say vindictive side. Maybe that's unfair, but wanting to punish us, I think, is pretty clear. Yeah.
So they don't want it to be an easy divorce, do they?
No. So wouldn't they just do that? Wouldn't they really punish us if we just said, well, we're not applying the protocol, we're not going to bother? Then wouldn't they go bananas, wouldn't they?
And how much should we read, if at all, Ursula von der Leyen cancelling her tea yesterday, which she was meant to be here in the UK? I mean, did that have any symbolism? Did that mean anything? And there could be a rebellion on the horizon, couldn't there? We've got Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Steve Baker, Northern Ireland Minister, ERG. I mean, there are lots of players to keep happy. I wouldn't want to be Rishi Sunak today.
No, the problem is, though, the problem is we're talking about it because you've got to talk about it because it's important. We don't actually know the details. And
nobody does. Not even our very own political correspondent. Nobody knows.
He's got his fingers in a few pies.
He does. He's got an ear to the ground, and nobody knows the detail. That's the fact of the matter, isn't it?
Has it actually been battered? Because if they're promoting it, which they are, they're letting us know that something's happening tomorrow, and if they're doing that and it's not actually been sort of signed off by all the necessary groups so far, then that's a gamble in and of itself.
Certainly
But
is.
maybe it has been. Maybe it's a done deal. Maybe the DUP said, yeah, OK, we'll settle for that. The EU's relented quite a lot. You never know.
But we were here last week, weren't we? So...
Well, no, I wasn't. I was in Scotland.
Well, I wasn't here either. But anyway, we're here in the Brexit negotiations last week. So we will see. Watch this space. Do keep those views coming in, though. GBViews at GBNews.
I can tell you, I did not have the news on last week when I was at work.
I was on a hen party in Brighton.
Oh, were you?
Last weekend, yes. I certainly didn't have the news on.
No.
No. Probably still in bed at this time.
Anyway, because you have got the news on, because you're watching and listening to us this morning, you will be aware of what they're calling the salad shortage and all this. A real concern over fruit and veg, actually.
Yeah.
And the National Farmers Union has warned that the current shortage of fruit and veg could be the tip of the iceberg, with supermarkets like Tesco continuing to limit produce like tomatoes to 3 per customer.
Yes, and the NFU also said the UK must take control of the food that we produce to prevent future shortages.
Well, let's talk to the director of Rayner Farms, Colin Rayner, who joins us now. Colin, very good morning to you. I mean, what is going on here? What is the state of play for farmers at the moment? Because there's lots of things actually happening, isn't it? There's all pressures from Ukraine and things which are adding to the problems, but also the weather's been dreadful for farmers over here as well. I mean, what is actually happening on the ground?
What is happening on the farms is that the government hasn't listened to us for 12 months. I came on this programme in August and said there will be food shortages this winter, and I've been proven right. Farmers like myself, we are not planting crops. We're not going to plant crops if we're going to lose money. And you've got to realise that over 40% of beef and sheep farmers are not restocking. At the moment, in 2022, we produced 1 billion less eggs in this country. And 12 months ago, the egg producers told the government that they were not restocking. So when you go into a supermarket, have you noticed they now check the eggs when you open when you buy eggs? The reason that is they're keeping the eggs longer, chickens longer, and the egg shells are thinner. This is the start of the beginning, and we will see food shortages. The government should have acted last autumn when we said, the farmers of this country, we can produce 100% of the food that we can grow in this country for the GB residents. At the moment, we're only producing 70%. The government is tying our hands. We have had tremendous price increases. We've had gas go up by 76%. We've had fertiliser go up by 169%, and we have our buyers trying to reduce our prices. At the moment, I normally grow 6,000 tonnes of maize, and the person I sell it to wants me to pay £10 a tonne less than he did last year. My fear is that we will have food shortages for the next couple of years unless this government wakes up and supports the farmers. We can produce the food that this country needs.
Yeah, OK,
And,
Colin,
I
mean, you say the government's not doing enough then, and obviously we're not food secure at the moment. So what does the government need to do to actually support farmers, in your view, to make sure that we are producing what we eat?
We need, we've got no fertiliser factories in this country anymore. We have to import all our fertiliser. The government needs to nationalise the fertiliser companies to start producing fertiliser. They need to subsidise the gas and electric supplies to the poultry and the pig industry. And they need to support us. They need to, at the moment, they have this policy. They want to rewild the countryside, plant grass and trees, and feed the birds and the bees. That's great when we have a full larder. Our larder is empty. There is no food reserves. And you've got to remember, this country nearly starved during the Second World War. From having full larders and people starving in this country was a matter of 5 weeks. I'm really concerned that the government and all party politics are not listening. We can produce the food. The farmers of this country can rise up. For the moment, I'm being paid to plant wildflowers. I've been paid not to plant crops. It's insanity when we have food shortages on our supermarkets. But I can tell people, if they go to any farm shop in this country, there are plenty of eggs and plenty of vegetables. There is no food shortages of vegetables in France or Germany, nothing to do with the weather. It's to do with the supermarkets and the government not wanting to pay the right price for the food. And as I said, there are 40% of beef farmers and sheep farms are not restocking. This is totally unnecessary, and the government just didn't listen.
Do you think there is a lack of knowledge, perhaps, from the British public about where their food comes from, and it only comes to when they're in a supermarket and they're looking for their eggs, or at the moment looking for their lettuce or their tomatoes, and they don't find it, when they start to think, you know, where does my food come from, and perhaps why isn't it there? I mean, there's been a lot of conversation in the last few weeks about Clarkson's Farm, Jeremy Clarkson's show, and the good that that's doing, really, to highlight the problems that farmers are having up and down the country, because it's not general knowledge, is it?
I think the public are very, very clever, and they do know where their food from. This is being organised by supermarkets and big retailers driving down the prices, and also that we have 1,000 police forces managing my business and what I can do and not do on my farm. You know, if we do it, there's a regulation. The only thing that's not policed in the countryside is crime and disorder. That's another subject for another day. But Clarkson has been a brilliant advocate for the agricultural industry, because when I watch it with my children, they say, well, that's just like our farm. The trouble that he has on his farm is the trouble that every farmer has. Day in, day out, we're trying to produce food, and we have 1,000 people trying to stop us produce food. And my hat's off to him. I know he's faced a lot of criticism, but every time we've tried to put up a grain store, tried to put in improve growing conditions where planning applications are refused. We have local councils that want us to stop putting slurry on the fields during the winter, then they refuse our planning applications for the slurry stores. It's just insanity out there. Yeah. But the farmers, we can grow the food, we can grow it cheaply, we can grow it safely. It doesn't need to come from South Africa. It doesn't need to come from Morocco. OK, we can't grow lemons and bananas, but we can grow most things.
Yeah, you grow just about everything else. Colin Rayner, really good to talk to you this morning. Thanks very much indeed. What an interesting perspective,
Definitely.
actually. Sort of deregulate it a little bit. Let them get that. Farmers get on with it.
Yep. Focus on our own food production. Yeah.
Well, let us know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.uk. We've got Aidan back in a couple of minutes. He's going to be looking to today's action-packed Six Nations match between Scotland and France.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Oh, am I reading
Sorry,
this?
yes, sorry.
All right, OK. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. Here's what else is coming up today.
At 8:50, we're going to be talking to an amazing man who's risking his life to save some of the most endangered creatures on the planet from the most damaged areas of Ukraine.
Then later on, to end the show, could you know the next Paralympic star? We're going to be joined by some of the coaching team who are helping to transform the face of British Paralympic cycling.
But it's time to talk rugby this morning. Aidan McGee is here. Morning, Aidan.
Morning.
Yeah, all right.
Good
but
to
it's
see
interesting. I mean, looking at what happened yesterday, but also looking ahead to what we've got today.
Exactly. I mean, look, England have struggled against Wales in the recent past, particularly in Cardiff. And it was at the Principality Stadium yesterday where they prevailed by 20 points to 10. But just look at the noise going into it from Wales. They did not have ideal preparation at all. And somebody who can offer a bit more insight on this is the former Wales rugby scrum half, Mike Phillips, 94 caps. Mike, it was such a difficult period of preparation for the Welsh players with the dispute going on with the Welsh Rugby Union. Just tell us more about that and how it would have affected the players on the day.
Yeah, well, by no means was it the best preparation. Obviously, as a professional sports person, you want to be just concentrating on your job, and that's, you know, getting yourself in the best place mentally, physically, and unfortunately, you know, I fully back the players. They shouldn't have taken that long to organise, you know, players' futures in the game. And we were a bit of a laughing stock, you know, for the last couple of weeks in Welsh rugby, and the players, obviously, they didn't do the business yesterday. I thought it was a tough, sort of challenging prep for them, but nevertheless, I thought the game in which they played, you know, wasn't great at all. There was a lot of kicking in it, a lot of aimless kicking. England just soaked that up and played immensely well. Even though England weren't, you know, amazingly on top of their game, but you know, for me, as a game as a whole, was pretty poor as a spectacle. But you know, England just needed to grind that out, and unfortunately, Wales, you know, the troubles sort of roll on.
And Mike, it was a scrappy performance or scrappy game contest, if you like. But was there evidence for you that the Wales players specifically, were affected by what's been going on in recent weeks?
Yeah, I think Ken Owens in the week, you know, a couple of days in the week, he sounded kind of disheartened and sort of, he's such a proud Welshman. He's a great captain, a great leader, and he's been there for so long. And you could just tell by his voice that it's kind of drained him. You know, he'd been let down by the WRU, and he himself, you know, chose some harsh words in the week in press conferences. And you know, you just don't want that. You're representing your country. It's a dream come true. to wear that red jersey as a Welshman, and just behind the scenes and the structure, things need to change and things need to become a lot more professional, because if you look at the under-20s, where we are in that league, we're bottom of that league currently, and we've been poor at that sort of age grade for many, many years now, whereas the likes of France and Ireland are just, constantly churning out these top players, and they're hitting the ground running when they come into the senior squad. So there's problems much deeper than just the national team at the minute, and it's not nice to see. And 10 years ago we played England, and I was playing, we won by 30-odd points, and 10 years on, we're just in this mess. So it's not nice to see, and we seriously need to make proper changes in order for the future of the game in Wales.
Mike, away from events in Cardiff yesterday, do you expect Ireland to go on to win it now, having won in Rome yesterday? And what are your predictions for this afternoon, Scotland against France? Because that looks like a decent game.
Yeah. Italy have improved immensely. They beat Australia in the autumn. They've been great in this tournament. I think a little bit unlucky against England a couple of weeks ago, and they were fantastic attack-wise yesterday. They beat Wales last year, and honestly, it doesn't look good for Wales. I mean, Wales' defence hasn't been great, and just the attacking threat of the Italians. They've got so many options. The forwards are so comfortable now with that ball in their hands. Lovely passes out the back, and they're playing some great stuff, and they've got that belief. So, look, I mean, I wouldn't bet against them beating Wales in a couple of weeks, and it's sad to say that, but this afternoon we've got another great game. Scotland going really well. France, superb game against Ireland a couple of weeks ago. It was a great advert for the game, and France, the second best team in the world, and I'm sure they'll come out firing today, and it'll be a tough game for Scotland. But it's great to see the performances of those type of teams improving and getting better now.
Mike, thanks very much indeed for joining us on GB News this morning. We do hope Wales' fortunes pick up, especially in a couple of weeks' time when they go to Italy. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Just briefly, I wanted to ask you, just before we run out of time, because something else that's going on today, Rangers-Celtic.
Yeah, huge game in Scotland. We've got the League Cup final in England today, but the same thing being mirrored in Scotland today. 3 o'clock at Hampden, and a chance for the new Rangers boss, who left QPR earlier in the season under controversial circumstances, a chance for him to put a trophy on the board. If he gets that one, a bit like Newcastle down in Wembley today, sometimes that domestic trophy can lift you on to further success, and Rangers will certainly be hoping for that today.
Yeah. Lovely. Aidan, thank you very much indeed.
Good to see you.
Thanks, Aidan. Stay with us, lots more to come, including a look inside today's papers alongside Tom Slater and Emma Burnell.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
You even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already depressed.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m. Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back.
Oh, she's straight in this time.
Well, you told me off last time for not talking.
Oh, that's a first.
Should we do it together?
Yes, this is Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie.
Yes. Well,
me
you
and
did
her.
that. Yeah, me and her.
Let's have a look at the papers this morning. Joining us today, editor of Spike, Tom Slater, and political consultant and journalist Emma Burnell. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Let's talk about. I presume this is Lord Sainsbury, is it, in the Observer?
Yes, so Labour has had 2 pieces of news that really show quite a strong progression from what was happening with them 5 years ago. Lord Sainsbury's returned as a donor. He'd previously been a donor under the New Labour years. He'd donated to the Lib Dems when they were sort of an explicitly anti-Brexit party. He's now come back and given £2 million to the Labour Party, which has meant the Labour Party is now debt-free. They've got a bigger war chest ready to fight the next election. And at the same time, and I think more symbolically important, Luciana Berger, who was hounded out of the party, treated appallingly, really, really nasty stuff. She has rejoined the party, which I think just feels, as a Labour member, like such a relief that she feels able to come back to that, because it was so heartbreaking, the way that she was treated and the way that certain party activists behaved towards her. And it just feels...
That was over the anti-Semitism.
It was over anti-Semitism. There was a lot of misogyny mixed in there as well. And it just feels like, I mean, there's still work to be done, but like a page has been turned, and I'm so glad that she feels able to come back.
Tom, new era for Labour, do you think?
Well, it seems like. I mean, it's been interesting, though, how the rumblings you hear, or the reporting and the briefing you hear from people around Keir Starmer is that they're trying to really guard against complacency, though. Because one thing that I think isn't really appreciated is they have this incredible poll lead. You think, sometimes over 50% and whatever. But because of the fact that the SNP is still dominating in Scotland, because of the fact that Labour has piled up a lot of support in cities and university towns and whatever, that even that could translate into a quite narrow majority or a minority government and so on. So it's just interesting. I think looking at the polls as they are and looking at the mood music and whatever, the one thing we also have to bear in mind is the fact that because of the scale of the defeats in recent years, in terms of in the Red Wall to the Tories and in Scotland to the SNP, it has to be this bigger jump for them to even to get back, which shows you how much of a hole they dug themselves for in previous years, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, 2019 was the worst result since 1934, I think, something like that. I mean, in modern times, essentially. And it was, there is a huge, huge road back. And I think they're absolutely right to guard against complacency. But it's stories like this do help you to build that narrative of being a party that's better ready and able to govern and better and ready to govern for everybody and not a narrow sect.
Oh, interesting.
Should we look at Save Our Salad? It's in
Yeah.
the Sun. We've been talking about this a lot this morning, haven't we?
So this is Mark Spencer, the food minister. It's a very good name for food
Well,
minister.
yes, isn't
It is. Not just a food policy, a Mark Spencer policy.
And that policy is to get all of the supermarkets in and harangue them, or at least that's what he wants the Sun on Sunday to report, because of this, again, shortage of vegetables, salads and so on that we've been talking about, and the kind of rationing that's been going on. This, of course, is naturally, in recent days on social media, become a kind of Brexit talking point. A lot of the kind of ultra-Remain types trying to suggest that this is that the bad weather in Spain and Morocco is essentially a product of us leaving the European Union. But nevertheless, it's quite clear that the government wants to get a grip on this for no other reason than the fact that this is not something that you want to be happening on your watch. So hopefully people's salad bags and their tomatoes and their cucumbers...
Yeah, but we were talking to a farmer earlier on, Colin Rayner, who made some really interesting points. I mean, he was saying part of the huge issue is the government isn't listening to them. They've got all the rewilding policies on all the rest of it. People not restocking on livestock and things because they can't afford to do it. You know, we need to move towards making us actually food secure in this country, and we could do that by not exactly deregulating it, but removing some of the regulations.
I mean, I think you can have much better, more sensible regulation, regulation that doesn't just look at 1 year, but looks at, you know, sort of 10, 20-year cycles. These are the things that we need to do. We need to have a sustainable farming industry that actually feeds us with the food that we want. That is not beyond the wit of man. Even if that man is a Tory minister. We need to be really thinking long term. And I think there is a combination of working towards energy security and food security. These should be a positive loop that work with each other so that there can be a countryside that works well into the future. And I do worry that we are losing a lot of our countryside skills, a lot of our countryside traditions and incomes. And, you know, these people have every right to be concerned about, you know, the things that they've traditionally passed on through their families just not being sustainable. And if you can't, you know, why would a young person these days go into farming?
And the energy crisis is a big part of this story as well, because the smaller proportion of some of the kind of non-seasonal vegetables and fruits that would have been grown in this country are in kind of, again, greenhouses and so on, which are taking up a lot of power, but we're effectively choosing not to do that because they were so concerned about the potential cost. So sorting that crisis out would also help a lot.
Yeah, I think sorting things out at home would be very important. Now, Emma, according to The Sun, you're going to be popping down the local getting 20 Julians and a pint of Assange.
Apparently, Julian Assange, from his prison, has registered trademarked various things, which include the potential that he can sell branded WikiLeaks cigarettes, WikiCigs, and Wiki alcohol. Wiki alcohol, I'm sure, would be 100% proof. But I'm not sure I would want to be drinking with Julian Assange. I'm not sure I'd trust him while I was less than aware.
Well, it's extraordinary, this, isn't it? I just find it very odd. So, I mean, this is to fund his extradition battle.
Yeah, apparently so. I mean, it's just... I think it's yet another. There's going to be a very small appetite for... There are a group of people who are just absolute Assange fans, will not hear a word against him, and start taking, you know, quite extreme stances on some of the things outside of the interesting work he did around revealing secrets. You know, on other things that he's accused of, and you go, well, if you don't like that, you also don't like this, and it's, well, actually, these are completely different, separate issues. There's also questions about the way that he revealed secrets, and other journalists have fallen out with him quite badly about the ways that he did it in such a way that actually put national security in danger.
Yeah.
But ultimately, there'll be a very small market, but it will probably be there. But it just feels like yet another way for Julian Assange to put himself at the centre of the story rather than anything that matters.
Tom?
Well, I think you can be concerned about the kind of, what I would see as the concerns around press freedom that are wrapped up in the whole Julian Assange extradition thing. Really kind of concerning about how, again, if just the US wants something, does our government just have to turn around and provide it, whilst also separating out the man, the things he's accused of, and also his tendency, as you say, to want to be the kind of centre of attention.
I mean, there's, in terms of what they want him over in the States for, I mean, that is legitimate, isn't it?
Well, I think it creates that uncomfortable question, which is the fact that, yeah, there are these national security concerns and whatever when you're talking about this kind of journalism. But at the same time, are we to suggest that just because these things are sensitive, that that it's in effect kind of illegitimate to actually report on it. These are the hard cases, but that's how you get to grips with this particular issue. And also that that very uncomfortable relationship that the UK government is put in is effectively having to provide him America's say-so. So there are really concerning principles at stake there, but again, it becomes unfortunately difficult to argue that in a situation where the man at the centre of it is less than reputable.
Yeah. Tom, should we go back to a food story with you, but something totally different this time?
There's a bit of a theme emerging.
There certainly is, over in Food Corner, over there. This is about the president's menus, the US presidents throughout history, and there's some really funny things on these menus, aren't there?
And I'm slightly regretting choosing this because it will put people off their breakfast. But so this is all the president's menus. There's been a book that's come out looking at what basically the food habits of various different presidents. So Abraham Lincoln, he loved possum dip.
What on earth is possum dip?
I didn't want to find out, so I haven't Googled it necessarily. But one made of possum mixed with things.
The idea of eating possum alone, but blended possum.
And possums are so cute.
You know, he grew up in a log cabin and whatnot. Presumably, it was the sort of fare he was used to. FDR apparently loved nothing more than buffalo tongue as an appetizer. It gets a bit better as it goes along. So JFK loved French cuisine, so he had a French chef cater to all his banquets. And of course, fast forward to Donald Trump, not a big fan of the state dinners, but he would bus in McDonald's.
Yeah.
Various different.
He did it for his guests as well, didn't he?
Well, according to Pinterest, possum dip, ground beef, beans, tomatoes, chilies, onion, garlic, salt.
Oh, that doesn't sound so bad. It's not actual possum. No possums were harmed in the making of this dip.
I mean, the implication here is it actually is possum.
Yeah, you would imagine that maybe they kept part of the recipe but left the possum bit, which surely no one these days is going to want.
I mean, it can't be an easy ingredient to sauce, I wouldn't have thought.
Maybe it was ground possum back in the day.
Yeah.
Lincoln's time.
And squirrel meat. So there can't be a lot of meat on a squirrel.
Sure, you'd have to get through quite a lot of them, wouldn't you?
You'd think
Which
so.
Is not.
But then isn't it funny, when it comes to food, we all get weird over some things.
And not others.
And not others. You know, it's like now we've gone right off eating rabbit and things.
Yeah, well, I blame Watership Down for that.
Yeah.
The only time I ever ate rabbit was when I was on a French exchange where I really couldn't say no, and all I could hear playing in my head was Bright Eyes.
Yeah. Oh, dear. Now, can we talk music and Bowie? Because what's not to love about David Bowie? Kick us off on this one, Emma. It's in the Sunday Mirror.
So David Bowie is apparently going to be getting the ABBA Voyage treatment, and there'll be a holographic show, which I am so excited by, because he's the one biggest regret of my life is that I never got to see Bowie live. So this will be the next best thing for people like me, and he was such an incredible showman. Yeah. Everything he did was about these brilliant shows. I've watched videos of things like the Glass Spider Tour and that last Ziggy Stardust show. So I can imagine that if that kind of Bowie-style imagination is put into this, with the imagination that's already gone into Voyager, which has been such an extraordinary success, I can see this being a really exciting thing.
Oh, it'll be massive. You do wonder though how eerie it might be as well, because obviously with the ABBA show notwithstanding, you know, these situations where you basically have, you know, artists who've sadly passed away being kind of presented in hologram form. Almost the better it is, the more creepy it becomes. The better the technology is, the more you get into uncanny valley.
The ABBA I've not seen it, but apparently it's like you just forget that
they're not there, yeah.
So it's meant to be that good, apparently. I did see David Bowie.
Oh, I'm so jealous, Stephen.
I mean, not a proper concert, at the Freddie Mercury tribute concert. So I saw him perform there. He did a couple of numbers. He did a Mott the Hoople track. He did was on with Annie Lennox. And
Oh, wow.
In his mint green suit.
That was a bizarre sartorial choice, yes.
But to be fair, I mean, that was an incredible event because of all the people that we saw that day. I was 18. It's a long time ago. And it was just from George Michael and all that.
Guns N' Roses.
Guns N' Roses. Yeah, it was just phenomenal. And it was an incredible chance to see all these absolute legends. But people like Bowie and George Michael and Annie Lennox, and it's just sealed with the voices. Yeah. You really got an appreciation of their talent. Actually.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I have grown up listening to Bowie all of my life. I remember sitting doing my GCSE revision homework out on the marshes quite near where I live with my little tape recorder playing Heroes. Just wonderful.
Great memories.
Legend, a legend.
Wonderful.
Tom Slater, Emma Burnell, thank you both very much
Thank
indeed.
you.
Nice to end on a legend.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There you go. Now, across England, there are as many as 225 national nature reserves, but the criteria to get the status has changed. It's meant to make the spaces more accessible to us.
Well, our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper paid a visit to the first area to become a nature reserve under the new guidelines.
The flashes of Wigan and Lee. Once the site for several of the county's coal mines, the area is now home to many of the region's flora and fauna. Wigan and Lee is an area famous for its involvement in Britain's industrial revolution, but now it's having its own ecological revolution as an area the size of almost 1,000 rugby league pitches has been made into a national nature reserve.
What we've got to do is we've got to bring wildlife back to landscapes where it's been lost. And I think the Wigan and Lee flashes, it's just such an inspiring example, because this is a landscape this was black in the 1950s and 1960s. There was mining still going on here into the 1990s.
A scheme formerly focused purely on conservation and research, Wigan and Lee is the first to become an NNR under a new set of criteria.
What the new criteria are about really is recognising the importance for people. This is a place where you've literally got terrace streets backing onto incredible wildlife habitats. And we've got 300,000 people within a couple of minutes, cycle ride. That's an absolutely incredible resource. So to recognise that nationally, that was part, I guess, of why this designation is so special, and it's brilliant for the people of Wigan and Lee.
But it won't just benefit the local people. This nationally significant project will also provide protected habitats for many iconic British species.
So there's about 800 hectares of mixed willow and reed bed and meadows and grasslands. So it's really important for a range of species such as bittern, water rail, hare, and our favourite, the willow tip.
Deemed in urgent need of help, 2.5% of the UK's willow tip population will now be protected by the site's NNR status. So, it's good for the animals, it's good for the people. What about good for the environment?
So the nature reserve is around about 2 degrees cooler than the surrounding urban land. So that's really good in helping to keep the area cool, and the habitats, the trees, the grasslands, the reed beds and the musslands that we have in this area are all sequestering carbon, making it much better for the sort of carbon equation, taking that carbon dioxide out of the air.
With huge benefits across the board, the flashes of Wigan and Lee have been truly transformed. From a heartland of smoke and coal into a hub for wildlife to flourish. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Now, sticking with a wildlife theme, since the Russian invasion of Ukraine a year ago, many animals have been stolen or slaughtered across the country, including some endangered species.
Well, one animal rescuer has saved 11 lions from the war-torn country so far and is planning on heading back to the war zone in search for other animals in need.
OK, well, let's talk to wildlife sanctuary owner and founders of Warriors of Wildlife, Lionel de Lange. Good to see you this morning, Lionel. First and foremost, why undertake this? You've got a passion for animals, obviously, but it must be very dangerous to go into that sort of situation.
Good morning, yes. Thanks for having me on. Why am I going back? Well, my passion for love of animals is something that I've always had. And then prior to the war, I lived in Ukraine for nearly 12 years. I was there when the shelling started. And prior to that, since 2014, I've been rescuing and relocating abused wildlife in Ukraine to various places around the world.
Lionel, what are the animals facing in Ukraine? I mean, when you get to cities like Kherson and Kyiv, what are you finding the conditions of the animals and where they've been kept, and how are the animals themselves?
Look, a lot of the big cats, a lot of the wildlife have been, most of them have been evacuated. They've all been living in really bad conditions. Some of the zoos have been bombed and shelled. There's lack of food. I mean, even people are starving. So, to find food for animals is also a bit of a problem. So the situation is not good. And, they don't ask to be put there. We as humans put them there. And now it's up to us to get them out. So I'm actually going back in. I leave on South Africa on the 12th. I just had to get another visa to get into Bucharest so that I could drive into Ukraine. I'm going after two highly endangered species, a black leopard and a jaguar, which are in the extreme east of Ukraine. They are under attack and they're occupied by the Russians at the moment. So we hope, we've got reports that they're still okay. We hope that they're still going to be okay when we get there. We'll only know when we get there. So I'll be sitting behind the front line, behind the army at the front line, waiting to go in as they liberate the town. And as we see with what the Russians do, as soon as they lose something, within 24 hours, they're shelling and bombing the heck out of the places that they can't have. So, and then also, domestic animals, cats, dogs, they all need help. There's no food and there's very little shelter left. And a lot of people, unfortunately, abandoned their animals and fled.
Well, and understandably so to an extent. I mean, it's an awful situation to be in, isn't it? I mean, I mean, certainly for the big cats and things, what life do they have, Lionel, when you get them to South Africa?
Oh, wow. Big open spaces. So a lot of these cats are very traumatized when we pick them up. Even prior to the war, the animals that we deal with, live in atrocious conditions. So at my sanctuary in Sambonga in the Eastern Cape, South Africa, we give them an introduction enclosure of 1/4 of a hectare. And bear in mind, 99% of these animals come out of a single garage-size concrete and steel cage. So now they experience everything. They've got grass and trees and fresh water, and they're really, really cared for. It's like heaven to them. You're flashing through some of the pictures. There's one cat there. He's called Simba, and he came out of Dnipro, which was severely bombed. He was the last animal to be evacuated. We got him to South Africa, and it took him 6 weeks to venture out of his night shelter. So we built a little shelter for these cats. So it's their safe space. And it took him 6 weeks to actually walk out and start enjoying the bush because he was so traumatized and didn't know that he could step across that threshold. So it's all ingrained into them that, they're locked up and they've got to stay that way forever. So now we just care for them for the rest of their lives and give them the best life possible.
Oh. Well, it's incredible work, Lionel, and we wish you all the very best as you head back to Ukraine. Stay safe, won't you? Thanks very much indeed.
How lucky those
Thank you, and thanks a lot,
Lionel. Yeah. Thank you so much, Lionel. Incredible, really. How brave to go into...
I mean, it's incredible. It is incredibly dangerous what Lionel Delanger and his team are doing. But anyway, let's wish him well as he tries to get more of these endangered animals out and into safety. Got much more coming up for you straight after the weather. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview channel 236.
And YouView channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m, Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
The Prime Minister says he's giving it everything to get a new Brexit deal over the line.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock, Sunday, the 26th of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Den.
Here are your top stories this morning. The Prime Minister is on the brink of completing a new deal that could finally see the Northern Ireland Protocol resolved. But Rishi Sunak still faces a challenge to get the deal through Parliament, with the Northern Ireland Minister reportedly on resignation watch after being frozen out of the negotiations.
Social housing managers will soon be required to study for qualifications as part of a drive to improve the sector in the wake of a 2-year-old's death in a mouldy flat. The Housing Secretary says the changes are needed as people are being inexcusably let down.
And disability cycling is about to receive a major funding boost to prepare for new cycling events at the 2028 Los Angeles Paralympics.
I'd love to hear from you this morning. Loads of you getting in touch. Going to go through some of those, including on cash stuffing. If you missed that bit earlier on, we'll explain what it is. We'll go through some of those in a minute. If you want to join in, gbviews at gbnews.uk. So the whole cash stuffing thing is it's a way of budgeting. So you get your envelopes in order, one for the gas bill, one for the food bill, then you put the cash in them. And once you've spent that, you've spent it. So you have to, it forces you to budget. Anna, morning Anna, says this is nothing new. This is what people did in the 50s before we had credit cards and online banking. Well, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
But that way you could only spend what you've got. you know, unless someone would give you something on the tick. But, I mean, of course, that was questionable. Anna says, I've always said people will eventually take all their money and hide it under the mattress. Well, you're almost as well to do that because you're not getting any interest on your bank accounts at the moment.
That's true.
So there you go. But it's a good idea.
Yep, Stephen says it's something we have always done. Older generation only had something if they could pay in cash. However, having lots of cash in the house is encouraging burglars. So maybe don't be stuffing it under your mattress.
No, maybe not the mattress. Hide it somewhere a bit more secure. There are loads of things you can buy now. Of course, that costs money. But, you know, those sort of tins that look like beans and things that are all fake and all that sort of stuff.
Clever, yeah.
You roll your cash up and shove them in that.
I've got an app on my phone that takes money from my bank account and just puts it away for me. Doesn't even ask me anymore.
Oh, it just does it.
Yeah,
on the
just
QT.
like £30 a week, something that you wouldn't necessarily see, and just takes it away and stuffs it away. And I forgot about it. And I checked it the other day, and it was great.
Oh.
So yeah, there are ways out there of stuffing your money away. And we need it, don't we, in this?
Little things, a few little, you'll round up to the
climate.
nearest pound or whatever when you do your shopping and it puts the rest in a different account. Yeah. I mean, look, we've got to do something, haven't we? And it's just what works with you. Rob says he loves this idea. When he started working 1,000,000 years ago, BT, I remember this, we were paid with an envelope containing a pay slip and cash. I never had problems budgeting until I applied for my first credit card. This is the trouble.
And then the temptation's there, isn't it? That's it.
Oh,
I was paid
at the end of the month.
cash in my first job. It was lovely.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for it, but I mean, I'm sort of old-fashioned in that I like it as an idea, but I have gone to a point now where I never use cash at all.
You're cashless, aren't you?
I am cashless now. Do it all on the phone.
It does feel weird to have cash. I have to get it out of my nails. It is a bit weird going and getting it. It feels quite foreign now to use cash. I think because obviously during COVID you're encouraged just to tap everything, weren't you?
And there are a lot of places now that don't take cash, which is the other issue. But anyway, it's a good idea if you're really needing to budget.
Yeah.
Maybe worth giving it a whirl for a month or two and seeing how you get on. Worth a try.
But do let us know what you think about that or any of the stories that we're talking about today. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We do love to hear from you, don't we?
We do indeed. Now, we've been talking about it all weekend. We're going to be talking about it a lot tomorrow as well, I should imagine, because Rishi Sunak, we're told, is on the very brink of completing a new deal on the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Yes, the Prime Minister held a conference call for Cabinet Ministers and is expected to make a statement to the House of Commons tomorrow.
The Irish Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, has said a deal was inching towards a conclusion, but what would that actually look like for Northern Ireland? Well, let's talk to former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall, who joins us now. Claire, morning to you. I mean, the problem is this is a bit of a minefield, isn't it? Because you can guarantee whatever we're given tomorrow, there are going to be some people who aren't happy.
Well, that's right. And I think Number 10 have put out the line across the weekend that this deal isn't going to please everybody. There is going to be nothing for everyone to get behind, but we have to do something and move on. This has now been dragging on for so long. The Northern Ireland Protocol, I think, is ingrained in everybody's minds. Not that everybody understands it, but it's one of those things that has never properly been sorted out with Brexit. And it's led us to almost a Schrodinger's Brexit. It's kind of done and it's not done at the same time. So he's going to have to be quite spectacular to pull something out that actually gets through the House of Commons, the DUP like it, and the EU accept it.
Yes, because he could face rebellion on so many different fronts, couldn't he, Claire? I mean, the ERG will be watching this very closely. Of course, the DUP can't go very far without their backing. And, of course, it's going to have Boris Johnson watching very, very closely. And we're reading in the papers this morning, Steve Baker, the Northern Ireland minister, he's on resignation watch already.
I think I'm not sure that that's actually quite true with Steve Baker. I think he will be watching this very, very closely and has always stated that there has to be Brexit, a proper Brexit, for him to stay put. But always remember the Northern Ireland Secretary is Chris Heaton-Harris, who is a chief Brexiteer and was a leading light in the ERG. So I'm sure that he understands what the negotiations mean to that faction of the party, but also balancing it out with what happens in Northern Ireland Ireland and with the DUP. So I think it's in quite safe hands. I think that Steve Baker, and I hope he does remain, I think he will, because we need that stability to go on and hopefully then reinstall the Northern Ireland Assembly, because at the moment they are still without that functioning assembly and will be for some time if this Brexit deal doesn't go through.
Take on the Boris Johnson scenario with all of this, because we've heard different views this morning saying, the idea of the bill, right, which Boris Johnson still wants to see put in place, which would in effect just rip up the protocol, wouldn't it? It'd say, well, the protocol's there, but we're not going to abide by it. We're just going to suit ourselves and all of this. Some people saying, well, that's a very good backstop for us. Others saying it'd spark a trade war. What do you reckon?
Boris Johnson is always going to stand by the deal that he put forward. You would never go out there and say, oh, yes, actually, my deal wasn't that great, so let's have another look at it. So I don't think that's particularly surprising. I think there are some real problems if you say that you're just going to do as you please and rip up all of the negotiations that have happened previously. The EU aren't going to settle with that, and there has to be some kind of middle ground and compromise. Boris Johnson is very knowledgeable in this. I know he's not been involved in the talks so far, but you wouldn't expect a backbench MP to have been involved so far. Until we know the real details of what Rishi Sunak has or hasn't negotiated, I think we're in a bit of a sort of grey area as to what we're going to expect. I think it's going to be another big week in politics, as we always say, but it's going to be quite interesting to see how those groups on the Conservative backbenches deal with this, and Rishi Sunak may find himself in a position of getting this bill through with Labour votes alone.
OK. Claire Pearsall, really good to have you on the programme, as always, this morning.
Now, coming up at 9:30, of course, it's Camilla Tominey, and Camilla joins us now to tell us what's in store, because you're going to be talking Northern Ireland, aren't you, Camilla? I mean, particularly because you've got Lord Frost on.
I know it's an amazing weekend to have Lord Frost. Obviously, he's the person who negotiated the Northern Ireland Protocol for Boris Johnson back in the day. I'm very intrigued to find out what he knows about this deal. There's a lot of reports in the papers this morning about the ERG and Brexiteers and the DUP being frozen out of the negotiations. They don't really know the substance. So Rishi Sunak, like many prime ministers before him, is running a bit of a risk here. Is he going to produce something that his own backbenchers rebel against? So again, we're in this prospect of going back to 2019. It's like history repeating itself with the Brexit wars once again raging. We're speaking to Lord Frost about that. We've also got Labour MP Jenny Chapman in the studio. Now, she's interesting because she comes from a very Remainerish standpoint. She was Keir Starmer's campaign manager, but she was also a shadow Brexit minister. So she's very much on the other side of the divide. I wonder what her reaction is going to be to another guest on the show, the DUP's Sammy Wilson. Now, we know the unionists are going to be sticking to their guns on this. You guys will be familiar with their 7-point test. They say they won't return to Stormont unless the government passes those tests. But all of this is about compromise. And I think what's been interesting in the newspapers this morning is the likes of some key Brexiteers like David Davis and indeed Daniel Hannan in the Telegraph saying, look, we need to be generous ourselves with what this deal looks like. You know, actually, maybe it will be OK. It seems to be a bit of a softening among Brexiteers. So there is a lot to discuss this morning.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly is.
Look forward to that, Camilla. Thank you very much. We'll see you at 9:30.
Thank you.
I think that's a good point, isn't it? Compromise is going to be the key word, to try and keep everybody happy, and there's an awful lot of parties to try and keep happy.
Yeah,
lots of players in this.
It'll be a difficult one. Right, let's bring it up to date with some of the other stories today at 9:11, and mountain rescue teams looking for hiker Kyle Sambrook say they've found the body of a man and a dog. The 33-year-old from Yorkshire went missing walking his beagle in Glencoe last weekend. Police Scotland say formal identification is yet to take place. His family have been informed.
Police in Northern Ireland have arrested a sixth person in connection with the attempted murder of an off-duty officer in Omagh. John Caldwell was at a sports centre with his son, where he coaches a youth football team, when he was shot. The Detective Chief Inspector remains critically ill.
Nearly 85,000 buildings were left without power yesterday in Los Angeles as a storm hits California. It's a low-pressure system from the Arctic which has led to heavy snow, rain and cold weather right across the state. It's triggered the first blizzard warning in California since 1989. Now, social housing managers will be required to study for qualifications according to new plans unveiled by the Housing Secretary.
Yes, the move is part of a drive to professionalise the sector following the death of a 2-year-old in a mouldy flat.
Well, let's talk to housing and property expert Richard Blanco, who joins us now. Morning to you, Richard. I mean, the terrifying conclusion from this would seem to be that a lot of these social housing managers didn't really know what they were doing.
Well, yes, to a certain extent. I mean, that might be a little bit harsh on them, but I think it's absolutely right that we need to bring in professional qualifications for managers, 25,000 of them. They're often dealing with the most vulnerable tenants, of course, in the social sector, and it's important that they really know what they're doing. One of my concerns is that, I want this to trickle down to frontline housing officers, because they're often the ones that are going out and doing the visits. And indeed, I'd like to see more visits, because what we've found since COVID is that a lot of the work has been done remotely, and housing officers have not been going out enough to actually meet tenants and see with their own eyes what's going on.
In your work, you must come across so much social housing. What can you tell us about some of the conditions that you come across that people are living in?
Well, there are issues with disrepair, and mould and damp, of course, has been one of the big issues. I think what we also see in social housing is the maintenance contracts are often outsourced. There's a lot of sort of patching up quite often, and tenants complain that contractors don't sort of get to the root of the problem and solve the problem. Whereas perhaps if it were a good private landlord, they would be going and making sure that the work's done themselves. And certainly the issue of damp and mould is a complicated one, because it does require the heating to be on to try and reduce the humidity in the property. It often requires improved ventilation, which means opening the windows. And a lot of tenants at the moment in the social sector, who are often on lower incomes, are nervous about putting the heating on. They don't want to open the windows because it's going to make the room cold and so on. So, it's a very challenging issue to deal with.
I mean, it's interesting because this is a longer-term solution, isn't it? The increasing the professionalism, being properly qualified in this field. There may be some people who say, 25,000 qualifications is going to cost a lot of money. We'd rather that money was spent on actually sorting the house out.
Yeah, that's true. But I think it's a good investment in the system. I mean, we also see the same problem with letting agents, where at the moment you don't have to have any qualifications to be a letting agent. And back in 2019, there were proposals that letting agents should have to be qualified. I think the professionalisation of the sector is really important, particularly, as I've said, because they're dealing with vulnerable tenants. But yes, we do need more investment in the quality of stock. And most importantly, there's a huge shortage of social housing. It just makes up 16% of all the housing in the UK. And we desperately need more social housing to be built. We all know about the long waiting lists for social housing, and, building more of it and better quality social housing should be a priority for government.
We're talking about training here for social housing managers, but will it trickle down to the social housing, to the front line, to people who are affected by issues like damp and mould, in an attempt to try and stop and prevent the deaths of, the 2-year-old that we're talking about now who died in a mouldy flat? I mean, it's just awful to think about, isn't it?
It is, and I think what happened in that case was that complaints were made many times, and the housing association just didn't get on top of the problem. And it often involves a surveyor going out to check what's happening, looking at where the damp's actually coming from, as well as talking to the tenant about heating and ventilation. So I think there is a concern that although we might be training managers, is there enough staff to actually go out there and solve the problem? And will housing officers, be sitting and talking to tenants and meeting them and trying to find out and resolve the problems? The social sector does benefit from having more modern stock. More of the social sector is kind of post-Second World War, whereas in the private rented sector, it tends to be pre-19, or a third of the private sector is pre-19. So, they're not dealing with as older properties as the private sector are, but nevertheless, some of those post-war properties are starting to get very run down and do need a lot of work.
Yeah, it's certainly got to be looked at. Be interesting to see how successful Michael Gove is with this. Richard, as always, it's good to see you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. Now, we're going to go to a short break, but when we come back, we're going to hear about how the face of British Paralympic cycling could be ready to transform.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
9:21, good morning to you. Watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie.
Now, disability cycling is set to receive a major funding boost to prepare for new cycling events at the 2028 Los Angeles Paralympics.
Yeah, paracycling stars Sam Ruddock and Chris McDonald are teaming up with British Cycling to provide opportunities for up to 5,000 disabled riders.
Yes, the National Disability Manager at British Cycling, Lindsay Hollands, and Secretary for Track Nation, Lucy Jackson, join us now. Good morning to you both. Brilliant to have you on the programme. So tell us a little bit about this new programme. It's called Limitless, isn't it? Tell us a bit more.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much for having us. So Limitless is British Cycling's brand new programme designed to get more disabled people interested in cycling. We've got a number of clubs all around the UK that are already part of our Limitless network, and we're really keen to get more clubs like Track Nation involved with the programme so we can provide more opportunities for more disabled riders.
Opportunities are needed then, Lucy?
They are, yeah. I think it's a brilliant thing that British Cycling have managed to find the investment for this particular campaign, because it's now getting to the point when it's not words, it's actions needed, and British Cycling are doing exactly that.
And Lucy, tell us about the benefits that come from cycling. I mean, the people that you work closely with, the people that you coach, what do they enjoy so much about it?
I think it's just a community spirit. Track Nation was formed 2 years ago after lockdown, when everyone was obviously feeling a little bit isolated. And we focus on the community aspect. So there's a semi-compulsory sort of drink session afterwards and food afterwards, where we can have a chat and get to know each other. And on the track behind me at the moment, there's 2 brand new stokers and 2 brand new pilots on tandems at the moment who are learning a new skill. And I can guarantee at the moment they're probably smiling their heads off. So it's really fun to see all that happening.
I'll tell you what I find fascinating about all of this, Lindsay, and I've got a number of disabled friends, and they've pointed out to me that with things like the Paralympics and a lot of the para sports, is that now we have moved to a point post-2012 where it is being viewed as a sport, you know, an incredible sport in its own right, without it being sort of branded as a disability, without it being sort of second-rated in any way as perhaps it was previously.
I'm really sorry, because of the track going on here, we couldn't hear the question very well. So if there's an opportunity, you could just...
Yeah, let me try again in that noisy environment. But do you think the attitude has changed towards para sports?
Oh, absolutely. We're finding that people's perceptions around disability are far more positive than they have been previously, which is making opportunities for inclusivity far more popular than it was before. And that's also what Limitless is all about, just trying to really demonstrate that people can do anything, regardless of their impairment. Often people find that they think that they can't cycle, or cycling isn't really for them, but that's what Limitless is all about, showcasing that anyone with any impairment can get involved. And I think from a club perspective, it's really nice to see that the able-bodied members of the club are absolutely fine with another tandem on track or an adapted bike on track. It makes no difference to them, as long as they have a mate to get involved with, and as long as they have a mate to cycle with on the days where we can't get on track. That's what this is about.
I was just about to say, it is that collaborative approach, isn't it? It's going to be between the able-bodied cyclists and the Paralympic stars, and together with British Cycling, just trying to encourage biking for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, as a national governing body, what we're trying to do, get more people on bikes and enjoying the many benefits of cycling.
Oh, brilliant. It's a brilliant message to end on as well. Lindsay and Lucy, fantastic to have you on the programme this morning.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. If you want to get involved in that, then get online, Google it away and find out where you can get involved.
Get on your bike.
Because it'd be a great thing to do.
Yeah.
Anyway, look, that is it from us. We're back next Friday.
We are.
But Camilla Tominey is here next. She's got all the very latest on the politics going on today, and in particular talking to Lord Frost about Northern Ireland and DUP. It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online across England.